Everybody, today is Wednesday, April 23rd. This is our Pickens County Commissioners' regular meeting. And first I'll ask the board and anybody else if there are any additions or deletions to the agenda.
Staff has none.
No additions or deletions to the menu. I keep saying that. I know what. It is kind of a menu of what's going on. They are kind of interchangeable words.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to circle that word next time. I will open for public comment at this time. Anybody wishing to state any public comments may do so at this time. Seeing none in the audience, I will close the public comment and bring it back for commissioner comments. Steve?
Just a reminder, there are several community cleanup things coming. The first one this Saturday is the frying pan cleanup. Meet in Basalt, I think, at 8:30 or sometime for the pancake breakfast and then the cleanup. Snowmass Capitol Creek is having their annual road cleanup on Saturday, May 10th. And the town of Snowmass Village is having their cleanup on, I believe it's May 30th. It's by the end of May. So you could put those on your calendars if you live in those communities or want to help out on another community's cleanup. Hope to see some of you out there.
Any other commissioner comments? George?
Yeah, we're just coming off a great ski season, and I want to acknowledge and thank the Aspen Ski Company and all their employees for helping us all to enjoy such a great season. As we put our skis away and the bikes come out, I want to remind everyone about we need to be sharing the road with one another. For car drivers, that means that you need to allow a minimum of 3 feet by law for a bicyclist. And for the bicyclist, you need to be aware that you're sharing a road with an automobile and not to ride 2 or 3 abreast and take up a whole lane, which impinges that driver to have to go onto an oncoming lane. So let's ride safely, share the road, and enjoy our bike season.
Very good. Other comments from the Commissioner? I'll make one quick comment. Yesterday was Earth Day, and just a reminder out there for everybody to take whatever measures they possibly can for conservation of resources. There was a little celebration out by Wagner Park yesterday. It was kind of fun to listen to some music, have a little lunch. The city put on, people from Energy Smart were there, and the city's environmental health department, and kind of fun to see some people out celebrating the planet that we live on. Great. I will move on to our consent action items, and we have the approval of the work session minutes of March 18th, March 25th, April 8th, the regular minute meetings of March 26th and April 9th, and special minute meetings of January 7th and March 4th.
I would move to approve with one correction, and that is on the minutes of March 18th at the very bottom of the page, our first page one, work session items. It is that PILT funding with a secure source, NACO has recommended it's the Land and Water Conservation Fund. So the word "and water" needs to be added in there. But that's the only small change. That's me, I'm sorry.
And I have one. Jeanette, March 4th, it's showing that I was chairing that meeting instead of Rob, so it should be Rob. Give me a second, I'll second that then.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Next on our agenda is the consent actions first reading set for public hearing on May 8th. First is a resolution approving the 2013 budget carryovers. This was continued because of an error. And
Susan is here.
Susan Atwood, Finance Department.
And I don't know if anybody had any questions, or if these are carryovers for things that were allocated in the budget for 2013. Projects are still ongoing, so the funds have to officially be carried forward to 2014. Kind of a routine procedure, budgetary, from a budget standpoint, that the county does every year. The reason why we're doing it in April is because we've had a lot of projects last year, I think.
You just get the chance to close out the books now.
Exactly. Any comments or questions? I'll take a motion if someone...
I would make a motion to approve the resolution approving the 2013 budget carryovers.
Second.
So first and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Next is a resolution accepting a CDOT Division of Aeronautics grant, and Brian is here to tell us what we're getting some money for.
Good morning, Brian Griefey, Assistant Aviation Director of Administration at the airport. Afternoon. Really, this is a grant amendment, and in 2011 we received a grant from the Colorado Department of Transportation for various projects we were doing that year. Total grant amount was $400,000. We weren't able to spend the entire amount, primarily because it was a match for federal dollars, 2.5% of the total, and some snow removal equipment that we funded at 100% with other means, specifically passenger facility charges. The state was in the process, we're all in the process of closing out the grant, where they recognized we had some money left in the grant, opted to amend it because there were eligible work items and other snow removal equipment we have purchased since 2011 that wasn't funded in any other way, was eligible for state funding, and they offered to do an amendment, not to increase the amount, but just to get us to collect the entire amount that they offered us when the grant was originally issued.
Okay.
Any questions? Steve?
It looks like you're going to use this money to repay for some of the snow removal equipment that was already purchased. Is that right?
Yes, snow removal equipment that was purchased actually last year. We're repaying, and then also some other funds that were paid. So all of the dollars associated with this grant have been expended, and this is purely a reimbursement now.
So is it shifting money from one account to another in the books, or what?
The expense account will stay the same, so that's already accounted for, documented, and really the revenue will stay the same. It just kind of opens up from the state's perspective what we can spend that money on. And really the key item there is there was a match on a federal grant where it funded only 2.5% of the total. There were some items that were not funded at all that they offered to reimburse at 90%, which you might expect that takes up quite a bit more money a lot faster, or grant funds, excuse me, faster. And that was really how we were able to utilize those funds.
Okay.
Make a motion.
Yep.
Make a motion to approve resolution approving the acceptance of the CDOT Division of Aeronautics Grant Agreement Amendment.
Second.
First and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And next we have our consent public hearing second readings. First is another airport issue, the resolution approving the Aspen-Picking County Airport Design Guidelines. We went through this in details, and Jim's not here.
Jim will not be here today, but we have Tim Malloy and Brian Griefey here to answer questions.
And I know we went through a lengthy discussion last time with some corrections and some minor things, but mostly praise to the hard work that you've done. Are there additional questions on this item?
No. I would make a motion.
It's public hearing.
Oh,
Well, this is a public hearing. Anybody wishing to speak on this? I'll open the public hearing. Anybody wishing to speak on this item may do so at this time.
Meg Haynes, as a member of the committee, I continue to endorse it and feel that everyone's done a lot of good work.
thank you.
Thank you, Meg, for your time, and the rest of the committee for all the time that they put in helping on this item. So, appreciate that. I will close the public hearing at this time and bring it back to the board. Steve.
We don't have the minor changes listed, but I mean, they were minor things, and I just trust that the rest of the document was really well written, and I trust that the changes were what we asked for without actually seeing them.
If you want, I can run through them. There's only enough.
No, I mean, I'm fine just accepting your word on that.
We have a motion.
I was going to make a motion
Yeah.
before the public hearing. Yes, I would move to approve the Aspen-Picken County Airport Design Guidelines.
Second?
First and second, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good work. Next, we have an ordinance transferring open space commercial use permit authority to the Open Space Department. Again, this is our public hearing, second reading on this item. We did go over it in detail the first time. I don't know if there are additional questions to this item, or if we'd like Dale, who wasn't here last time, to give his thoughts on it.
I think it'd be good to hear Dale
Yeah.
before the public hearing.
Okay, well, I think that the basic issues were pretty well presented in the memo, and I understand from Gary that our perspective on this seemed to be fairly easy to grasp. Well, I see this as sort of a natural evolution of the open space system, where as it's gotten larger and larger, we are trying to increase the efficiencies of how we administer things within the system, and we've reached a point where in our discussions with community development, everyone's agreed that it just makes more sense for open space to administer commercial use permits within the system. There's multiple reasons for that. One, from the perspective of the permittees, we are able to approach those permits I think less expensively than community development because of the way our program is funded and administered. Secondly, we like to develop ongoing relationships with these commercial operators, and between our ranger program and the people that are in charge of these various whitewater groups or whoever they might be, to be able to make a quick phone call and find out, why is someone parked there or not, or that kind of thing. Again, it's more efficient to have a direct and ongoing relationship. So I don't really see that there's any downside. At first reading, there was a request to have an annual report back to the county commissioners on how this is going. I discussed that with John Peacock, and we agreed that the best way to structure that in is to include it in the direction that's given as you adopt the ordinance, rather than putting it in the ordinance or the code itself. And since we do have a separate IGA with the commissioners and the Open Space Board to have 4 quarterly joint meetings, and at the 4th quarter meeting we try to wrap up how things have gone during the year,
the most natural place to put that in is at that fourth quarter joint meeting. We're happy to give you a full rundown on how this goes, and really we look forward to trying to increase our umbrella to pick up some of the smaller commercial users on the open space properties who aren't currently in the system, and gain their help in the way we all manage these properties.
Yeah, will you give some examples of what these permits are allowing people to do on our open space? Because
sure,
that's really the gist of the matter of things, and I guess what it's not too, because it's not special events like
correct
bike race or a running race or something like that.
We are currently permitting river rafters and
the paragliders on North Star.
So those are two examples. There's commercial businesses that want to be able to either launch boats or get boats out of the river with paying customers on them at Jaffe Park. And we also are administering the boat ramp that's down at Wingo Junction. So that's an example of an existing commercial use that's going on. Looking forward, we are aware that we have outfitting operations who take paying customers onto our properties to go fishing. And there may be similar organizations that are taking paying customers onto our properties to go bike riding or hiking. And for those small-scale operations, we believe that having our own permit system and having moderate application fees will work better. But those are examples of the kind of entities. Taylor Creek Fly Shop, for example, I know has a program of taking people on guided trips on properties to go fly fishing. So those are the types of entities we're hoping to engage and work with by having this new authority.
Is this a practice that that various people haven't been following over the years, whether it be fly fishers or hiking guides or whatnot that are traversing across open space lands?
We believe so. The county land use code presently requires that all commercial activities have a permit, but there are small-scale entities that have been flying below the radar, and we've been aware of it. And the present structure of the permitting system has really been part of the disincentive for some of these very small operations to kind of come out in the open. So, but we think we know how to find them and how to get them enrolled in the system.
Additional questions? Michael?
Dale, how do you balance commercial use versus public use?
It's an excellent question, and all of our management plans set to create ways we can measure the carrying capacity of properties. And the carrying capacity is not only an ecological issue, but it's a social tolerance issue as well. And we are trying to get better and better at finding out whether the properties are getting too crowded, either from a natural resource point of view or a public use point of view. And beyond that, we strive to accept that commercial use is a form of public use, in the sense that if I wanted to go raft down Slaughterhouse Falls, I wouldn't likely get my own kayak and do it. I'd be much more likely to pay someone to take me down there in one of their boats. So there is a public benefit to having some guided access that's paid for. Now we do, as I said, try to be sure that the commercial operators aren't displacing the public or the wildlife by having that access. So it's a balance, and you have.
Well, and Jaffe Park's a great example of the commercial use and the public use, because before we did that permit system, it was kind of chaos, and we were getting a ton of complaints from the private boaters that the commercial boaters were parking all over the place and preventing them from launching. And so we set up this permit system with the permittees. And, over the last 7 years, it's worked really well. We get very, very few, if any, complaints anymore. We've been able to, work with the commercial outfitters to say, hey, you got 45 minutes to unload, get out, and then you got to move your stuff out of the way. And you also, in your permit, you have to let the public in. And so they now know that the public is now allowed in. At times, the public feels welcome. They welcome them. And, we usually go by complaints, and the complaints have dropped. And so, with the commercial fishing, the paragliding and all that, what we're trying to do is work with the operators to make sure that the public doesn't get displaced and to also manage the resource.
Do you do permitting at Stein Park? Because you mentioned slaughterhouse.
We do. At Stein Park, we work with the city on that, but since it is in the county is going to be the permitter for Stein Park. So when those come in, we will permit those too. But we work, since it's in Aspen Valley Land Trust property managed by the city, we then work with them on that. But that's another great example of how, that park especially gets overrun pretty easily. And we've worked really hard, and we watch, because the commercial operators cannot park more than their bus there for a certain period of time, then they've got to take off. And so, in the past, all the people that were going on the commercial trip were parking at Stein Park and taking up those limited spots. Now we've gotten that different, so it's actually helping the public access that park through that.
Is there a threshold to needing this permit, or is it any commercial use? One fisherman, one guest as a paid guide?
Well, commercial use is really something that occurs more than one time. Like a special event is something that's going to happen for a specific period of time. Commercial is an event that's going to happen continuously throughout the season. And, with the rafting guides, we've set up a whole permit guidelines for rafting. When we work with the angling guides, we're going to work up on that permit to say, hey, if you're a person using it once with one guide, do you need to be under this permit system or not? So we're going to try to bring everyone into the discussion and set up a permit system that addresses all of those questions about, how many guides it's going to take, how many people are you taking, where are you parking, how much is all that stuff. So it takes some time to implement, but that's, with the bike operators and everybody else, the personal trainers, there's so many people that use our system that we're going to try to figure out what really needs to be under a commercial use system and what is not truly, an impact that we don't have to regulate.
So we don't really have an answer for that. I mean, there's some leeway in this regulation, the way it's written now, but we talk about things like $2,000 bonding for the commercial use.
We may do it.
We may do. It's kind of, we're going to do the research and kind of find out what the appropriate requirements for a commercial permit will be.
Exactly. And that's why it's great that we'll report back to you every year to kind of give you the updates, because this year we're going to work with the angling guides and try to get that, into a permit system, and we'll show you what it looks like. And then, as we work on more and more of these things every year, you'll get an annual update on all of this stuff. Our goal is really to protect the resource. It's not like a revenue generator. The rafting, we do generate some revenue, and it's been great because what the rafting guides have done is that revenue has gone directly into protecting the resource. Where at Jaffe Park, we used to have a boat ramp that was just a cut in the dirt. And so we created a concrete boat ramp and eliminated all the erosion that was happening out of there. And all that money came from their permit fees. And so their permit fees also help with porta potties and everything else.
Yeah. Additional questions? This is a public hearing. I'll open the public hearing. Anybody wishing to speak on this item may do so at this time. Seeing none, I will bring it back to the board. Discussion or a motion?
I'll make a motion if you're ready.
Yep.
I'll make a motion to approve transferring the open space commercial use permit authority to the open space department.
Second?
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next is another open space agenda item. It's an ordinance of the Board of County Commissioners of Pickens County, Colorado, authorizing the Open Space Master Plan Authority.
Okay, thanks. Since Cindy was here last time, I wasn't able to be here. I guess I'll start on this. As was discussed at the last meeting, really the central idea here is to create the authority that Pitkin County is able to utilize both of its open space department and its community development department in an integrated way in trying to achieve conservation objectives that are common to both our land use code and to the open space mission. And we had this authority for a couple of years. We got a couple of great projects done, the Cold Mountain Ranch Conservation and the Grange Ranch Conservation, which are both beautiful ranches that sit right on the edge of municipalities, and through those projects we were able to ensure that that urban limit line with those agricultural activities is permanent. So we're pretty proud of getting that done. In the years since this authority has lapsed, we've really been focused on different types of projects. We've been focused on outright purchase of properties that have gone into these mountain parks that we have, the Sky Mountain Park and Smuggler Mountain Open Space, things like that. We haven't been doing as many conservation easements, which is really not deliberate so much as that's just been the opportunities that we've had have been a different nature. Presently, we have several landowners that are interested in working with this type of authority on properties that we don't want to discuss them in an open session, because we do like to negotiate these private transactions privately until we have agreements. But nonetheless, we've got very significant properties in the pipeline where the owners have come forth and said that they would be willing to do some conservation if they were able to secure certain types of vested rights. So the basic idea here is to create an integrated structure where that can happen. And I understand from the last meeting that some questions were raised about some of the details of this particular proposal, and I tried to answer those in sort of a frequently asked question style format here. And if you'd like, I can toggle through that information. So one change with the current proposal is that we don't want this program to throw off TDRs out into the marketplace. In the two deals that I talked about, the Grange Ranch and the Cold Mountain Ranch, there were TDRs provided to the landowner as part of the compensation package, and it's possible that those TDRs will wind up in the market, and that's sort of a secondary form of compensation to the landowner, the primary form, of course, being the open space dollars, as well as the land use entitlements that were provided. Here, we don't want to throw off TDRs from this program because we've determined that the open space dollars and land use entitlements ought to themselves be an adequate form of compensation. So we've closed that off. The question came up, would landowners in this program still be required to purchase TDRs for additional square footage? Well, as you discussed at the last meeting, a nuance with the current proposal is that we would like flexibility to go over the standard maximum or standard development, right, at 5750 within the Aspen area. So the question then is if we do that, will these landowners be required to buy TDRs? And frankly, the code that we had put forth is silent on that question. I had made the conceptual assumption coming forward that we weren't going to do that because we're trying to maximize the incentive that we can provide through the primary forms of compensation, the dollars and the land use entitlements. However, there's nothing in this code section, unless John Ely thinks I'm wrong, that would prevent us from agreeing that you could have a larger house conditioned upon you going out and buying the TDR to make that happen. So I would see that as something that the county as a whole could deliberate on in an individual negotiation. My only other comment about it is that if we were to go down that path in a negotiation, I would see that it have a direct effect on the price we would be needing to pay and or the land use entitlements or the public benefits we would be seeking in terms of conservation and public access, that sort of thing. So my recommendation would be to go ahead and approve this as is, knowing that in an individual negotiation, if the particulars suggested that it would be desirable to make that additional square footage conditioned on the purchase of a TDR, the county actually could do that.
And I'd like to add that it's also embodied in the ordinance that the master plans for the neighborhoods would be honored. So if, say, Snowmass Capital said, well, in this case, never mind, Snowmass Capital wouldn't be allowed to use the larger without buying TDRs, but the neighborhood's honor, of 8250 or 15,000, whatever it is that they said in their master plan is acceptable in the neighborhood, would be honored in this negotiation. So in this case, that area would include Owl Creek, which does allow homes to go up to 15,000 square feet. It would include the Castle and Maroon Creek areas, both of which did not want to put limitations on house size.
So,
Rachel?
Well, I don't know. I don't want to interrupt it there in the middle of the presentation.
well, that leads to the question Rachel asked at the last meeting, is that if we were to allow these increases in square footage without TDR purchase, is that going to hurt the market for TDRs? In my opinion, the impact would be negligible, because when we look at the parcels that would qualify for this type of discussion within this Aspen area, there's 21 or 22 of those properties, but of those, I think there's maybe 6 that the county would want to invite to have this type of discussion. So worst case here is if we were talking about 6 larger homes being permitted at the county's discretion and without purchasing TDRs. When you look at the potential of 6 lost sales of TDRs against the number of TDRs that are out there and the magnitude of the market that we have going already, I think that the county should have the discretion to go ahead and do that, knowing that there would be some sort of small impact on the marketplace.
George?
So, just so I understand, which I think this is fairly clear, but what we're looking at in regards to an update within the Upper Valley area is to allow a homeowner to go up to 8250 without using a TDR and have an extended vesting. My question, if that's correct, the way I understand it.
Slight clarification, we could negotiate that they could go up to whatever the maximum is allowed by the community master plan and the zoning.
Right, so that was my follow-up question. So, for example, if it's in the Woody Creek area where right now it's eligible to go up to 15,000, I'm just trying to understand the process, because for additional TDRs to expand the FAR, that's a discretion on the BOCC, so we have to come before the board. And so in terms of your negotiation, I'm just trying to understand how that might work in terms of the back and forth.
It's a stepped approval process, so that if one of these negotiations was going on, generally Cindy and I are going to be the ones in the person's kitchen finding out what they're willing to do and what they need to make it happen. Once we reached a level that we were willing to make a recommendation to support what the landowner was willing to do, the next step would be consent from the Open Space Board, get their recommendation or not, and then finally, the whole package is presented to you for your consideration. It's not unlike what the request for a TDR landing site would be, which would come to you anyway. So it's just a different route by which you would be presented with that decision.
Okay, thank you.
Rachel?
Yeah, just to follow up on that. I have supported this program in the past, and I support the concept now, but I really am not liking the details. And, to George's point, on the actual ordinance itself, it says very specifically, the Board of County Commissioners will review the approval process, but we can only approve the exact recommendations made by ComDev and Open Space and Trails Board. So there'd be no chance at this table to amend it whatsoever. So it would come already cooked, and it would be, as has been said in other forms, that we would be the spoiler. We'd either be the ones to say no, or we'd go along. But it really would take all discretion away from the board. And I'm concerned that this process really eliminates the hearing officer's review, whereas in the past, a landing site for TDR is a hearing officer and public comment on the size of the home, and back and forth would be allowed as to whether it was appropriate to go all the way to 15, or maybe they should only go to 10.5. But now the hearing officer would be out, and the public's review would be out as well. So I don't like that aspect of it. And overall, just kind of doing very rough math, if there were 6 home sites that wanted to go up to 15,000 square feet, that would have normally taken 24 TDRs. And at $200 each, that's a lot of value that's being created by house sizes outside of the TDR program. And the TDR program was where house size negotiations or transactions were occurring. And so at what point do we start having house size authority vested for other purposes? Maybe, and I just don't like the idea that house size issues will now be determined by ComDev and Open Space working together, but there'll be no hearing officer and no involvement of our board. We can reject or accept, but that's it. And it's, it really, to me, undermines a major principle of our code for a long time about house sizes. And now house sizes are what's being negotiated for conservation, as opposed to, you can still do this, purchase some TDRs. And I am concerned it's going to upset the balance in the TDR market. If it was, again, just 6 properties, it'd be 24 TDRs. If it was 8 properties, it'd be 30, 35 TDRs. It would not be purchased. And, we're doing things on 2 sides of the scale here. On this side of the scale, only larger homes within the UGB and none in the other areas. So there's less landing spots there. And then up in the UGB, there's less landing spots as well, because people are going to get their house size through a new program and not through using TDRs. And I just think the TDR program has been very finely coined and has worked very well for a long period of time. And I just don't like fiddling around the edges and thinking, well, it'll be a negligible effect, because I see, again, lowering the places where TDRs could be allowed to land, and then lowering both in the UGB and outside the UGB. And it's creating a new tool for this conservation by monetizing house sizes outside of the TDR program. I mean, we all know how much a square foot can be worth in the construction world. And I just find that to be wrong, to take it outside of the TDR program.
Michael?
There are limitations on house size. I mean, it says here, gross floor area shall not exceed 5,750, except in exceptional circumstances. Within the geographic area above the confluence of the Roaring Fork River and Brush Creek, including east of Aspen, Castle Lagoon, Brush Creek, and Owl Creek planning areas, as otherwise depicted on the attached map, an exceptional circumstance may be found if all of the following conditions are met. The subject property is outside the rural and remote zone, and within the above described area, the approval of a residence unit in excess of 5750 gross floor area would not create significant visual impacts on public roads, public trails, or nearby public lands, would not significantly degrade surrounding rural character, would not, so that, I mean, I think you can make an argument that the addition of TDRs is going to degrade rural character. I don't know, but you could. Would not create significant light and air and water pollution or traffic impacts, and so forth and so on. So, I mean, there's lots of limitations. You know, the way to get around it is to allow TDRs to be used, and I think that these conditions say they shall, you know, there has to be exceptional circumstances for them to be used. So, I don't know.
Well,
What's the resolution? I don't think the resolution is adding TDRs so you could get a 15,000 square foot house. I think what they were trying to do here was to have circumstances where it was almost impossible to ignore these constraints and still have a conservation development.
well, Michael, I guess this is my concern. These conditions and criteria which you just listed are the criteria which a hearing officer would normally consider in landing or agreeing to land TDRs on a site above 5750. And now this is a process where it's going to be through ComDev and open space and trails deciding whether these factors are negatively affected or not. And then it's going to come to our board to say yes entirely or no entirely, but absolutely no ability to change the program that's presented. So it's taking the land use process out of the board's discretion. And I'm concerned with that. And as you outlined it, it's exactly my concern, is that we are changing where TDRs can land. And we're saying that the rest of the valley, when they're trying to use this program, will not be landing TDRs. And the upper valley won't have to land TDRs if they're using this program in order to get to a larger house size. So I think you're basically eliminating the utility of TDRs of an existing program, and I think that affects the existing market, and it affects people who've accepted TDRs, and I think it'll affect the market of people who would accept TDRs in the future. So you know, others can go forward with it, but I think it's an experiment I don't want to try, and I think that the previous land conservation measure would be sufficient, and if we were just able to lower it to eligibility under 70 acres, or 270 acres, and lower the eligibility level.
Yeah.
Well, let me try to maybe separate some of the issues that Rachel's raised, because I think they're interesting issues. On the procedural point, the notion that of accepting or rejecting the proposal, that was part of our earlier authority that we had back in '07. And the way this plays out in practice is similar to what open space negotiations do currently, where if the Open Space Board makes a recommendation to all of you to go spend $17 million on Sky Mountain Park, you can say yes or no, and if you say no, it's not the end of the discussion. It's essentially remanding it back to the Open Space Board to try harder to come up with a deal that you would want. Now, we also have the tool that we use of meeting with the commissioners in exec session to discuss these negotiations, so that we try very hard not to have a surprise come up. So procedurally, I don't think we would have a problem of having a potential transaction presented to you and then putting you in the position of either accepting something you wouldn't like or scuttling the whole discussion. We've got established ways that we collaborate so that we avoid that particular pitfall. And that was really what I wanted to say. Maybe just a footnote is there's currently some other exceptions in the land use code that allow TDRs, larger houses to occur without TDRs that aren't hearing officer review, such as the exception for the 500 acre lot. So, but I want to make sure we find a system here that works for everybody, and I can think of all kinds of ways to modify this, but I'd like to know what the majority on the board wants us to do here.
Are there other, since you brought it up, are there other exceptions to the TDR requirement other than the 500-acre lot within our land use code? Because that's a pretty extreme exception, a 500-acre lot. So I'm not so sure that that's a perfect example of the fact that because we have an exception elsewhere, that this is an appropriate place for an exception.
The other one that's noted, and there's kind of an appendix here, that apparently the CDPUD residential development option also has that. What I don't know is whether that goes through the hearing officer.
Please no.
So there's another example.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, Michael.
I mean, the discussion, I was at the discussion of the open space and trails. The idea was that if you were going to create these conservation deals, that an increase in house size was antithetical to a conservation deal, and that there had to be some exceptional circumstance to allow it to happen. And so arguing for the use of TDRs in this is arguing against conservation, it seems to me. This in and of itself is a conservation effort that was not helped by the increase in house size. And so that comes back to us, and we say, hey, listen, are you telling me on a 70-acre parcel that you've negotiated a 15,000 square foot house without the use of TDRs? We don't think that's conservation-minded, and we'd send it back. So I don't want to allow TDRs because I don't want to give that right. I want to have negotiations that provide the best conservation easement we can get, and part of that package is a smaller house.
I just want to clarify on this, because here's where I'm having the struggle with, which is I view this, the thing that I'm uneasy about with this is I view this as an ability for Open Space and Trails to make a recommendation to us to basically create a new funding source for making these conservation easements happen, which is the not using of a TDR and instead kind of creating the TDR and giving it to them out of thin air by allowing them to grow their square footage to a larger sense. As opposed to, let's say, a conservation negotiation was hypothetically around $1 million for some piece of property, and they say, well, we want $1 million and we want, to get up to 15,000 square feet. Well, you could offer whatever the equivalent is of TDRs from the Open Space and Trails Fund and have them buy the TDRs to put on that piece of property. So it's basically creating a new cash flow for Open Space and Trails, as opposed to paying them $1.5 million and having them spend that $500,000 on buying TDRs to get up to 15,000 square feet. That's where I'm kind of uneasy. It's kind of and it does tax our community. And I'm using that word very specifically because the Open Space and Trails Fund was a specific tax at a specific level for people to pay. And when we have development within our community is taxed. And this is a tax without a vote of the citizens in some sense, in the sense that it's creating an impact to the community, it's creating an impact to roads, it's creating an impact to all sorts of things with allowing that larger development. And that's where I'm kind of uneasy on this. That's where I side with Rachel. Where I side with Michael is I do think that we do have an authority as a board to say, no, we don't want this, but I don't necessarily want to be put in that position of a yes or no. Rachel and then George.
Yeah, just to respond to a couple of the things that have been said. When we were negotiating for something like Drosty, we tell the Open Space Board, you are authorized to go up to X amount. And if they tell the people they're negotiating with that and they say no, they can come back to us. It's not the same to say, well, here it is, we've been negotiating for months, and if we say, well, no, at that point, there's still something we don't like, you probably have a very disaffected landowner who's invested a lot of time in the process and thought that with the two boards already saying yes, the third board had to. And that's very different from a land negotiation. I'm also concerned that a purchase negotiation, whether it's for conservation easement or for outright fee ownership, is one thing that is allowed to be done in executive session. When you start saying, well, we're going to negotiate your whole subdivision in executive session, including the house sizes, I think that excludes the public, and I don't think that that's appropriate. And I just have a very awkwardness there. And I think Rob is stating it differently than I would, but it is creating a new a bit of value that open space could offer, and that is house size authority. And why move away from the TDR program? Is the TDR program so flawed that we don't want to use it anymore? I don't think so. And you look at the AACP that was just passed, and if anything, within the urban growth boundary, people are very concerned about the impacts of extremely large homes. And here we've gone and said, well, we'll take care of the down valley. They can only be 5750 from now on, and they can't receive TDRs, and they can generate TDRs in other areas, or they can't generate TDRs, but they're no longer a receiving area. The receiving area is up in the urban growth boundary without any sort of hearing officer review, and it will be reviewed by Open Space and Trails and ComDev without what is detailed in here is any sort of public process for the neighbors on that site plan. And I just don't, I think it runs counter to the concerns expressed in the AACP, frankly. And I will say, I support the open space mill levy. I think it's appropriate. That is how we all pay for our open space purchases. To now say that house size without the TDR program is how we purchase open space, that is a very new twist. And should we start adding it to other commissions and other powers? I don't know. It just doesn't seem cooked to me, and it's kind of messing with something that has worked well. I don't want to mess with. I like the concept in general, but I don't know why TDRs were brought into it in such a way.
I'm sorry, I think I was going to go to George.
And you can answer this, Cindy or Dale, as well. My first question is, when I look at the primary elements of the 2007 code, you have the one-stop program combining home site approvals, open space funding for parcels of over 160 acres, and then as I go down the list, you have free market residential square footage, maximum 5750 square feet, overall residential size limitation of 6750. So does that mean that in the past code that we're still working on under, that with an open space negotiation, it could allow a homeowner to go up to 6750 without a TDR?
No, that provision was actually included at the time based on the peculiarities of the Grange negotiation. They wanted a 5750 with a 1,000 square foot caretaker unit to go with each of three they had there. So that's where the 6750 had come from. But that authority expired in 2008 or 2009. So if I could, on Rob's point, it's true that by having authority to allow the larger houses without the requirement of purchasing a TDR, you're essentially subsidizing the open space program. On the other hand, by eliminating the production of TDRs from this code provision, which it had in the past, you're shifting the burden the other way from the TDR program to the open space program. Where the net is, whether the shift is more on one side or the other, we don't know, because we'd have to speculate on how these transactions would actually go. But certainly open space and the TDR program have been essentially partnering or trading properties back and forth, one or the other, for years. I just wanted to note that if this provision on the house sizes is simply too much to put in this. The ready solution would be to just take that provision out, because we also want this authority to get to work on some of the large properties that are down ballot. I think I haven't yet seen where the will of the board is as a whole.
Steve?
The Snowmass Capitol Creek area has the provision to have an 8,250 square foot house in exceptional circumstances. And if there were a big property there that wanted to follow this program, they would be not allowed, even in an exceptional circumstance, to ask for an 8,250 house, even if it might be like a perfectly acceptable thing that wouldn't be visible from any place. I don't think your plan has enough flexibility in it. For instance, the homeowner might, or landowner might be willing to give up 3 or 4 development rights in order to build the one bigger house. If you look at the Gerbaugh Ranch, where all of the Watson Divide area has all of the development was concentrated in the one 15,000 square foot house at the top. And it preserved the whole way down where the elk cross all winter long, where there's no houses. So that to me is better than having a whole series of 5750 houses going down Watson Divide. I'd rather have a smaller house than 15,000 up at the top, but compared to what might have happened, I think we have a pretty good deal there, and that could be an example of what this would lead to, is maybe one bigger house and no houses on a big portion of the land. So I'd rather see the flexibility left in for, leave the TDRs in as a one tool in the toolbox for possible negotiations, because some landowners might want to, maybe the process would be they could receive TDRs and use a couple of them on their own land, have their own, one of their house sites be a landing site right there, might be the mechanism to do that. But I'd rather see more flexibility in the whole negotiating process to get the best possible deal and to get more landowners also to participate in it, because there'd be more options than just what you've presented.
George?
I thought the reason why we're steering away from TDRs as part of an open space acquisition is because we didn't want to use the TDR program. We wanted to rely more on the open space mill levy to purchase and put a conservation easement on. And so that's why we deliberately said we're not going to include adding a TDR as part of the package that we're negotiating with. That's correct, right?
Right.
So I'm losing my train of thought here. I guess, in theory, I don't have that much of a problem in terms of the way this is presented, because you're looking at a finite number of properties in a finite geographic area, and what we're saying is that it's sort of another tool in the toolbox for Dale to negotiate with a landowner to allow up to a home of 8,250 without doing a TDR. But as part of the negotiation, I would think that might impact the price that you're willing to pay as well, because they're getting something that actually has a value, as Rachel says, if they were to have to purchase a TDR. So it's kind of, you're kind of coming about it the same way. I'm not sure it's going to denigrate the current TDR program as it is. If you're just looking at it at the maximum 8,250, I think if you start to go above that, then they would still have to purchase a TDR, and then it would still have to come back to both boards to see if that actually is going to be a reasonable request given some of the criteria and restraints you have in this ordinance. So I'm not having that much of a problem with it.
Rachel?
You know, but as it's written, George, it can be negotiated up to 15,000 square feet without a TDR. It's not limited to a house size of 8,250 within the urban growth area boundaries. I mean, so as written,
Okay, I
we're,
missed that part.
we're
So-
giving them the ability to go up to 15,000.
So what I would say then is allow the 8250, but anything above and beyond, they would have to do a TDR, and then of course it's with the discretion of the BOCC, and it has to be part of the negotiations.
Yeah. I still come back to, you know, we have a land use code that says 5750 as a underlying right. And when you want to add and land TDRs on those sites, you currently have a hearing officer process to look through all the criteria of lighting, wildlife, impacts, and so on. And this doesn't mention or detail at all how the hearing officer and how the public gets involved in that process, or at what point. Do they get involved when the ComDev is negotiating with them, when Open Space and Trails is negotiating with them? Do they get to hear what's happening after an executive session on purchase? I have no idea how the public, the neighbors, the neighborhood fit into this process. The second is, you know, again, it's a fundamental principle here, but it's talking about saying we are giving Open Space and Trails a new tool to use. They can determine house size. That it's a house size currently, whatever the price of a current TDR is for 2,500 square feet, whether that's 200,000, 250,000, that's what we're giving Open Space and Trails now the ability to use. It's like free money, except that it comes out of neighborhood impacts and house sizes, and that long-term impacts on the roads. I have a hard time doing that. I just have a hard time doing that. We have a TDR program set up for those purposes, to say for conservation, you conserve your land, you get a TDR, you can sell it to someone else who wants to buy a bigger property or build a bigger property. That's the system we have set up now, and we're now talking about circumventing that for a limited purpose, perhaps limited impact, but what are the next set of limited circumstances and impacts? You can have a bigger house size if you move 150 feet away from a stream. You can have a bigger house size if you preserve another potato cellar. You know, I just find it totally undermines the land use code and the TDR program as it's set up now. And as Dale has said, it could be brought forward without the TDR component, and it could be brought up in other areas. But as it is right now, it just really flies in the face of a lot of sentiment that went from the Aspen area community into the community plan about concerns about the larger homes. And are they getting that benefit of where land is conserved? We're going to be, you know, only allowing larger house sizes up in the urban growth boundary where the TDRs can land. I just am not comfortable with it. Perhaps there's a way this could be worked through as a matrix and have some more time on it, but at least right now I can't create a new tool that gives the Open Space Board and ComDev working together $800,000, $1 million worth of house size value that they can throw in to boot to make a deal happen because we don't want to use the TDR program anymore. That's what upsets me. Yeah, it'll lower the purchase price. If it was going to be $2 million, now it's going to have to be $3 million. That's appropriate to me. And let them buy and settle and retire 3 TDRs to get the house size that they want, and we pay the price for them to do that, not say we're going to create value out of thin air, and that is the impact of house sizes.
Michael?
Let me go back to this, because this really, I think, isn't an argument for greater house size here. This says, gross floor area shall not exceed 5750 per unit, except in exceptional circumstances. So right there's a limitation.
And within the urban growth boundary.
On those house sizes. So, and the reason for that is that it was deemed by the Open Space and Trails Board that it would be inconsistent to have large houses, very large houses, and conservation values. You couldn't really unite those two. And so they decided to limit those. And I'd be perfectly willing to accept absolute limitation of 8250 because these particular paragraphs mirror the Snowmass Capital Creek provisions. So to get to 8250, so I'm perfectly happy to do that. And the argument that we're taking TDRs off the table is a good argument because you don't want to allow 15,000 square foot houses within a conservation development. That's all this is. It's not. And on top of that, people aren't building, at least at this point, aren't really building 15,000 square foot houses. They might be building 8250 square foot houses. So I think this, if we added the absolute limit of 8250, it would be fine. I think we'd have conservation values within these small parcels, and we'd have smaller house sizes. And you'd still have to go through all the exceptions for exactly why you could add that, because it didn't have any impacts on conservation values or the surrounding land. So that makes a lot of sense to me. And we're not taking, the board itself, the Open Space and Trails Board, is well aware of what conservation values are and is not about to trade those conservation values away under any circumstances.
I'm still having a hard time understanding why Open Space and Trails in a negotiation before it gets to the BOCC as a recommendation doesn't pay $200,000 more in that circumstance and have them buy a TDR to land on that site. I haven't heard an argument that says that, to my belief, that I don't think Open Space and Trails should be able to create that asset out of thin air. And I understand the limitation of going up to 8,000 square feet as opposed to the 5,750. I agree with that aspect because it meets the goal better that the whole basis of this is conservation, and a smaller house represents conservation in some aspects. And then the other aspect that you mentioned was the exceptional circumstance. It's such a interpretation of the reader type thing. Well, this is exceptional, that's exceptional, and we're taking it out of the hands of the BOCC. We're slightly taking it out of the hands of the BOCC in terms of what that interpretation is. So I'm uncomfortable with that language as well, because I don't like language that's not specific.
Right. Would you add then a strict limitation of 8250 and the provision that they would have to buy a TDR to reach that point under exceptional circumstances?
Yeah. And that's kind of where I was saying is that somehow they need to buy that TDR. That TDR needs to be an asset in the market that's protected, because that's the way the program works. Rachel?
I believe that we should table this item so that there can be a chance for staff to both give us the pros and cons of what's just was suggested here, and perhaps if they'd like to try better explanations. I don't think we're going to reach resolution on something full of language right here, right now, and we have a lot of other items on the agenda. But for me, it really comes back to I don't think the house size authority should be part of a negotiating tool without TDR purchase and without a process that allows the neighbors and the publics to somehow participate meaningfully. And in the past, the landing of TDRs for larger house size relates to a hearing officer proposal.
It hasn't in regards to open space purchases, Rachel.
The pre-2007 open space ordinance did give that authority. So a lot of the successes that we had in the conservation world actually allowed just this type of a program. So it was outside of the TDR program. What I would like to add is that I think you have to keep this in a perspective that this is just one of all of these tools. It's not meant to cover anything. It's not an extreme measure that would then say to someone in the lower part of the county, in the rural parts of the county, that they couldn't get or use a TDR scheme with another land use tool. This is just one tool in that whole basket of tools, if you will, that allows this interaction with open space and ComDev. And I would say that the only reason for your argument, Rob, would be that someone would say that process was that important to them, that they would try to go through a more simple process with
the person we're negotiating
the
with.
applicant, or actually we ask. This tool is one where the county asked a landowner to become involved in one of these conservation scenarios, but the applicant might find the benefit of going through a simpler process as the real key to the negotiations, and not to have to go through and purchase a TDR and to have it all in one package. To someone might be very meaningful in their time frame and their time scheme that we see in this community. So that is another advantage of this particular model. I would say that looking at the potential properties that would be allowed to go under this scheme, allowed to go larger in house size, there's actually probably some benefit to the county of not having additional TDRs come onto the market, because this would tie that up. If I had a 90-acre piece of property and I had a few TDRs that could come off of the property, that it couldn't happen under this scheme. The conservation tool would not allow you to create TDRs off of this property.
Well, I agree with not creating TDRs, but I also don't think that Open Space and Trails should have the authority to create a TDR, which is really what they're doing in essence by not paying $200,000 and just giving them the extra square footage.
Another way to look at it.
And that's where it lies. I mean, you say you want the applicant to have a simpler process, and I agree with that. But at some point, I think the BOCC needs to draw a line and say, the creation of TDRs is an authority that lies here, and I view it as if Open Space and Trails wants to increase square footage without the extinguishing of a TDR, they're in essence creating a TDR and giving it to the person, and that to me, I mean, long ago I was pinned as the grow baby grow guy, and here I am saying, the authority of TDRs lies, or creation of additional square footage beyond what is allowed in our land use code. That authority lies with the BOCC, not with Open Space and Trails. And if Open Space and Trails wants to have a process where it comes to us first, we make a recommendation to them, and then the recommendation comes back to us. Maybe that's the way it should be. Rachel?
Well, really briefly, Cindy, in the example you just gave, under the older scenario, that person with a 90-acre parcel perhaps created their own TDRs on site and used them on site, and it was often part of the development approval that the TDRs would be used on site for your greater. But again, it just is, it is up to 15,000 square feet as written here. That's what could be negotiated outside of a traditional process, and I just can't support that. So I appreciate the hard work and the intent and the desire that you have for new tools, but there's just components of this that set the wrong precedent for me.
Well, whatever happens, I think this is a great conversation, and it shows the evolution of where we've come with the TDR program and the perspective or the trade-offs with conservation and house size and all of the work that we do in the land use world with open space. So I think it's been fascinating to hear this conversation.
Rob, since we're on TV, I just want to make the point that open space is not seeking to achieve additional authority here. We're seeking to empower the county to do something that would ultimately be approved by the commissioners. The question is just how you want to go about setting that up. So.
Steve?
One good thing that you have in this ordinance, and I was thinking back to my family's experience, we were negotiating with open space and trails, and we were negotiating with ComDev and back, and it's like this triangle the whole time. And it lengthened the process considerably, and I think you have it built into here that eliminates a lot of that and would actually expedite reviewing things and getting the negotiating done. So I try to keep that part in on the reworking. If we move to continue this, what date would be a good date that you could have it reworked by?
Oh, well, we can rework this consistent with specific direction pretty quickly. If I understand the direction, the proposal would be to modify the current code language to put an absolute maximum of 8250 and to require that if that were allowed by the commissioners, that it would also require the absorption of an existing TDR to achieve. That's a pretty simple thing to write. If the continuation is for some other purpose, then I need to understand what you want us to bring back.
George?
I'm okay with what you just stated, Dale.
Yeah. Michael? Rachel?
I am, but I want it to be clear that the 8250 is outside the urban growth boundaries in the map, and that the consistency with existing underlying zoning within the urban growth boundary areas still would remain. I mean, that's...
Well, it would never have been outside of existing zoning.
Right. But I don't want to eliminate further through this measure existing zoning, or do we? I mean, maybe if we bring, okay, because I'm getting confused between areas that allow 15,000 square feet, and if you're working with a property owner whose property would allow that, are we now saying that that property would be limited to 8250 regardless of where it is?
If they choose this,
Right.
if they choose this program, it would be.
So that may be eliminating the tool's use within the upper valley per your map now, because your ordinance as presented to us would have allowed those homes to go up to 15,000 square feet within this upper valley region in the urban growth
It
area.
would be limiting the use of the tool within that area to
Yes.
something smaller. Right.
Okay.
Only where they could have gone up to 15 already.
Right, well, that's why I want to make sure, because that's where TDRs get used up. You know, I mean, I don't want to create an ordinance that undercuts the TDR program. So I'd at least like to see that brought back and with very clear, definitive maps of where and what you would allow. And perhaps we could modify it at that time if the board so agreed. But I fully agree with keeping it to those lower valley areas with a maximum. But Steve has already made a good case for sometimes one large house is better than 5 small ones.
Point of order, it is a
Yeah.
public meeting. We can then either continue, or if there's a way to just move this forward now with majority and sort of move along with the agenda.
Well, someone has to make a motion for...
Why don't I open the public hearing at this point and take public comment. If there's anybody who wishes to make comment on this item, they may do so at this point. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for either a motion for approval in some form or a motion for continuance until our next meeting. Steve?
I move to continue until May 14th, my birthday.
Pre-K.
Bye, Steve again.
Thanks
Thanks for reminding.
I'll second that.
Wait, get more from open space, right?
I'll second the motion.
Any discussion?
Yeah, and the purpose, what's the purpose to continue with, Steve?
For
What would you like to see done?
For the ordinance to be reworked, given in light of the comments that we have made today, to try to bring it back in a form that's more acceptable to the BOCC.
Okay, what I heard, at least from a few of us, was that the few changes that Dale suggested was acceptable. So I'm just curious what else you might want staff to work on, just to help clarify for them.
I'd like to know where the public process lies. How was the public involved, the neighbors informed, have a chance to comment?
Do they normally have a chance to comment on an open space negotiation acquisition?
Well, they normally do when there's house sizes landed in very large subdivisions on what are relatively small lots. Now it can go down to 70 feet. I just want to see this written up clean and have a chance to review the provisions again as opposed to verbally.
I'm just curious.
Further discussion, Michael?
Well, I think if they were able to adjust it to an absolute limit of 8250 and the subsequent TDR used to increase it to 8250 from 5750, that's straightforward. That's fine. It comes to us. That's fine. I think those changes are sufficient to move this thing forward. I don't think we need a continuation for that.
Well,
Vote
we have
against
a-
that motion and then try another motion if you want.
Rachel had the major concern about that this is like circumventing the whole TDR program and making it a little bit not, a non-entity. And that's a major change that it's not just changing a few words in the ordinance. It's a very serious change that I think we need to think about.
I think that the suggestion that's been made may cure that problem, but again, I'd rather see it written up rather than vote on verbals, and I think it's a lot easier for our staff to make sure they've gotten the ordinance right as opposed to general direction. I'd love to see what the public involvement is and how that is going to play out, and I do question what seems to be a fairly significant change at this table right now, saying all house sizes anywhere using this program can only be 8250, when that might really inhibit the tool within the urban growth boundaries and within the areas that currently allow 15,000 square foot homes. And I want to know what that impact would be and what those areas would be. So I just think we need to have a new presentation and the ordinance written correctly. That's why I'm arguing for continuance, and I won't say anything more.
This is something that Gary said to me. He said, if you close the Red Canyon Trail to the public, it also has to be closed to all the private individuals on the ranch, which the Suki family agrees to, and they agreed to pay for the monitoring that would take place to ensure that there's no access up Red Canyon in the wintertime. The easement on the purple section B here would be expanded. The dates now call for closure of this trail on the hillside on November 1st. Kevin said that doesn't work. It would be changed to December 1st. There's a requirement in the settlement agreement that hunters have to carry their rifles in cases when they're crossing the ranch. And Kevin said that that doesn't work at all for a hunter to go across the ranch with their gun in a case and then stash their case somewhere and go hunting. So that would be removed as well. The Sukis have agreed to that. So that's the proposal that the families has. And as I said before, if there's any inclination on your part to entertain this proposal, we're open to any suggestions that you have to perhaps ask for additional concessions from the Suki family on the rest of the ranch to implement this trails plan that we're talking about. If it's of no interest to you at all to entertain this plan, then you can tell us that and we'll just drop it and it won't be a topic of discussion.
Rachel?
I think that the changes on the winter closure are probably warranted and are a good idea, as well as the expansion time for hunters. But I'm going to just hold back until we actually do a site visit and take a look on the ground what you're talking about. It seems like a lot of effort to get people up on that hillside just to avoid having them on the old ranch road. And I realize parts of that were the settlement we reached before over the old RS-2477 roads in the property. But I just need to really take a look at that on the ground.
Michael?
Yeah, I understand why you'd want to do it, but the county was on the doorstep of federal court. to get the trail that you outlined. And so the applicant has said, well, we're not giving up anything, anywhere. In fact, we'd like to trade entitlements that we have or we think we have. So I just don't. I mean, I'm like Rachel. I'd be willing to go out there and check it out, but my initial reaction is skepticism, cynicism, and doubt.
Steve?
Somewhere in the application, I remember reading that the applicant is willing to consider giving up the development rights on work code property in exchange for moving the trail to your proposed trail. And that, to me, might possibly be the best thing for the wildlife, especially coupled with closing the trail during the wintertime. It seems like of all the house sites that one has the most problems because it's right in the middle of the wildlife area. It's, with a 100-foot stream setback thing, then there's that issue. There's potential flooding problems and other things. Also, the Woody Creek Caucus Planning Board recommended against extending the vesting rights for the work cook parcel. And since it seems to be a bargaining chip, since the applicant has offered that as, a possible thing, I'd be willing to consider that trade. That seems reasonable to me. And I'm willing to look at the new trail just so long as the public access is maintained. Same thing happened on adjoining property to us where the landowner on the Nicholson place really didn't want the trail going right by their cabin. They wanted it over by the edge of their property, and it's actually worked out very well. The public still has access, and the landowner has a lot more privacy, and this is a similar situation to that. So I definitely need to look at it on the ground, but conceptually it sounds like would be a workable thing to me.
George?
Initially I don't really have any major problems with it. I think a site visit would be good. I think to hear from our staff, Gary Tannenbaum, because he knows how to do trails and where to do trails, and get his input as well. And if we can use that to try to reconfigure some of the development proposals, that may be a win-win for everybody.
Rachel?
I was just going to ask you, as chair, it would be all right if we hear from Kevin Wright, since he's here and sitting through this. He's behind the pillar. You probably can't see him.
Yeah.
But we've had so many references to Kevin, and either that or give us a formal letter on this afterwards, or something. But it just seems appropriate.
Let me ask a question first before we go to Kevin, because it's more pertinent to other stuff. Tell me Glenn, can you outline the details of the parking lot that's in the agreement and what that pertains, and whose property it's on, who maintains it, what access there is via that parking lot?
I can't do that, but perhaps Dave, can you do that for us?
Sure.
And again, just say your name because it's being recorded for the minutes. Thanks, Dave.
The parking lot is actually on Aspen Valley Ranch property, but it's on the south side of River Road, and the trail actually starts on the north side, so you do have to cross the road. There is another smaller parking area that's been historically used to go west, through the ranch and towards, I can't think if it's
The Gervais Road
to the Triangle Peak Road. But the main parking area would be on the south side of the road on the flat bench. And there's an area that's open there that people park on regularly. We're committed to improve that parking lot if the county asks us to. But for right now, I think it was Gary's position and others that the current state is more than adequate for the extent of use that's going on. We also agreed to provide an easement to go from the parking area on the ranch property down the hillside to the Rio Grande Trail, so that the county could build a trail connecting from Rio Grande up the hill to the parking lot and across the road to the trailhead. Does that answer?
Yes.
Okay.
Steve?
Along that same line, the red line of A extending off of the map that direction, is that the trail that connects to that Jerboz Road up Triangle Mountain?
Yes.
It does, the trail. I know I've been along there one time walking.
There's a short stretch that's on ranch property, and then it follows a power line and connects to the road that goes up the Triangle Peak.
Okay.
Kevin, you want to give us a little bit of your feedback? Kevin Wright from the...
Kevin Wright, Colorado Parks and Wildlife now, that's what they call us. So, I'll answer any of your questions you have about wildlife. If you need any, other verification from what Jonathan said, for the most part. I can just get right into the trail issue first. I'll be real honest with you. I'd just assume there wouldn't be a trail, period. I'm a strong believer that we don't need to have trails going into real sensitive wildlife habitats in this valley anymore. Our recreational pressures in this valley have just skyrocketed, and wildlife's paying the price for it. And so to put new trails into critical winter range areas and transitional areas just doesn't make sense from a wildlife perspective. That being said, if a trail is constructed in this area, I think we have come up with a pretty good plan. We walked with Gary Tenenbaum and Glenn and Jonathan, and where you see there in the purple, that A route, we go along the toe of the slope. Actually, then start to go up a little bit of the hill, hit like an old road cut where it comes up to that segment of B. And we try to tuck it down so it stay in on the edge of the sagebrush versus going through the middle of the sagebrush down in the pinyon juniper and go through there. And it would be on a grade that Gary said you could use mountain bikes on. So you would still be able to use that grade the way we aligned it getting in there. I think the most important thing of all of this is the total closure. I don't agree with the settlement agreement that happened to allow winter use in that area. Again, our winter ranges in this valley are getting pounded by recreational pressures. We got skiers, we got hikers, we got dog walkers, fat tire bikes. It's putting an extreme amount of pressure on our wintering wildlife at a time that they shouldn't be disturbed. Just for those reasons, they're on a declining diet. They don't gain weight, they lose weight throughout the winter time. Anytime they're disturbed, it creates their metabolic rates increase. They start, getting into that fat reserves. It also has been shown through research that it has a pretty significant impact on our reproductive success. And right now in our valley, our calf-cow ratios and doe-fawn ratios are not nearly where they ought to be. And one of the primary reasons that we believe for that is the recreational pressures that are happening in our winter ranges as well as our production areas. So that's why you kind of see me a lot of times not real favorable toward new trails. We have a lot of trails in this valley already, and to start placing new trails, I understand people's desire to want to go into some of these areas, but for this portion, this Triangle Peak, Red Canyon, Dry Woody, all through there, is really, really important winter ranges. It's where I start getting into, if I'm doing my deer and elk counts in the wintertime by helicopter shore, we really start getting into really large concentrations of animals. All the way from Albany Kittle, all the way through this Triangle Peak area, and up above Dry Woody. So it is very, very important. So it is, to me, it's critical that we minimize disturbance during the winter period up there. We just don't need people going in there in the wintertime.
Rachel?
Yeah, thank you for that, Kevin. And just two kind of follow-up questions, and particularly based on what you just said and getting the closure dates right. Would it be more appropriate to not open it till May 1st as opposed to April 1st?
That was in my letter, and I was going to correct it. When we went out there and looked at it, it was December 1st through April 30th that we closed with open on May 1st,
okay.
Which would be good, because if you walk in there now, you'll see all the deer and stuff, especially on that segment above B there and that sagebrush flats and stuff. The deer are really pounding it. And it would be a really good time right before, they give birth, not to have that disturbance.
That's kind of what I was thinking. The date seemed a little quick on
Yes.
snowy years
So
like this.
Through April 30, yeah.
Okay. And then the second question would be related to the Work Cook parcel, which is currently not developed. And I guess I'll just ask it this way. If you had your druthers, would you rather see that not developed in the future?
Oh, certainly. That's an easy question for me. From a wildlife perspective, it would be, and when you saw those two areas that Jonathan had on that, sensitive wildlife habitats here and here, but not through that middle. And the primary reason for that is because of the snow depth. The snow really lays down in the bottom of the flat. Depending on the year, the elk will push through it sometimes, and so you'll start seeing them using a constant trail, and the deer will actually follow the elk trails through there.
Sure.
There's been lion use in there this year. Actually, we had a couple of horses hit by a lion on the ranch this year. So it just goes to show you the lions and stuff are concentrated to where the deer and elk are and stuff. So it just shows really how important this area is, important for everything, from a predator standpoint to the big game standpoint to the brewer sparrow on the sagebrush flats in the spring.
Thank you very much.
Steve?
Kevin, I know it's not your department, but do you know what the BLM management plan and their proposed management plan for that part of Red Canyon is in their resource management plan?
I am starting to dig into that. On the recent, what they came out with, I asked for it to be a core wildlife area, designated as a core wildlife area. I do not believe it received that designation. I think it'll still maintain at least a motorized closure going up the Triangle Peak Road. I'm hoping also to get the mechanized closure and everything in there. Like I said, a lot of these places are just going to be a total people closure anymore, just because of the issues we're having with this astronomical recreational pressures in the valley. But I can't tell you right now. I'm trying to dive into it now as my time allows. So.
Yeah, when we looked at that the other day, we were looking at the Crown and Light Hill and things, but we should have been asking about this one too.
All I know is on the chart they had on the RMP plan in there, it didn't have the Triangle Peak Red Canyon area in there listed, which has me concerned. And that's all I can really say. I just don't know yet until I dive into it. I'm trying to get through it. It's a hard document to go through.
Okay, yeah, definitely. Thank
Michael?
You. So, Kevin, I've heard you talk about, that you're not for development of trails and areas, but so does the Parks and Wildlife endorse subdivision development next to sensitive habitat?
Well, I don't know if we really endorse any development. Basically our job as a referral agency is to come in and say, these are going to be the impacts, and these are what you can do to minimize those impacts. I can't really come in and say, no, you can't build there. We can go and say what the impacts will be.
Well, what would your preference be? If you had a preference for...
I'd love to have this be just a working ranch.
Without
density
sure. Development.
But we got...
That's fine.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Is that all? Oh, that was easy. Thank you.
Any further questions at this point for Glenn? If not, I'll open up the public comment portion of this hearing. All right, I'll open the public hearing at this point. Anybody wishing to make comment on this may do so at this time. Just state your name and your affiliation for the record, and keep it to about 3 minutes or so, I think would be appropriate. Anybody? Yeah?
My name is Janet Schoberline. I'm a resident of Woody Creek. Actually, I live on Upper River Road. And I've talked to several people who have attempted in past years to hike on that trail. And many times they are refused entrance or they're kicked out after they come in. So that's one of my main concerns, is that the gatekeepers never seem to get the message that they're supposed to allow people to go in there.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to make public comments at this time? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing on this item and bring it back to the board. Rachel?
I'd like to make a motion to continue this item, but I want to give us a little time to think about how much time it'll take to have a site visit scheduled, and then have the continuation of the hearing after the site visit. I think that's the only way that makes sense. And I don't know, Glenn, you would know if it needs to melt off a little more, or, perhaps we just pick a date and then staff can work on scheduling the site visit with you, and if the two don't coincide again, we can continue again. So I would look for maybe a staff recommendation on what should be the first date. We kick this to May 14th or May 28th.
May 28th is the celestial hearing, and we've tried to keep other land use items off of that agenda.
That makes sense.
So, and
there already are some others in addition.
On that day.
But we've tried to avoid putting things on that date.
So if we were able to schedule a site visit between now and the 14th, that might be a little pushing it on us. I don't know for the rest of our schedules. Or,
I don't think I'll be able to do that.
Okay. So then, perhaps the meeting of Wednesday, the 18th of June. I mean, looking further out. I know Steve and I are both gone at CCI on the.
The 18th.
Oh, excuse me, the 11th. You're right, the 11th. So, June 11th.
One.
The 11th works for me for continuing this.
And then we'd have time, a month and a half, to get a site visit in between.
And
yeah, the 11th is our first regular meeting in June. Would that work for you, Michael? Glenn, would that work for you guys if we had this June 11th?
Yes. Have the continuation, June 11th.
Yeah, I would move to continue the Aspen Valley Ranch Major Amendment to a Development Permit, Activity Envelope, and Site Plan Review, Special Review, and GMQS Exemption for Caretaker Dwelling Unit till Wednesday, June 11th.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. I will start some discussion on this, because I think one of the things that's pertinent here is that we give some feedback for Suzanne to work with Glenn on a resolution of some sort.
I don't know that I can give that feedback until I've had a site visit. I mean, we've seen the issues, but I'm not prepared to offer direction on those.
Glenn, do you want to make a quick comment on that?
Yeah, Brooke just made a comment. Is May 14th definitely out because the site visit can't be done before then? Is that what I understood? Because we would sure like to do it, on May 14th if we could do a site visit.
Yeah, and I feel that what's potentially going to happen without proper feedback on various issues right now is that we're going to have a site visit. We're going to have another meeting to address the concerns of each one of these items. The moving of the structures down to Lot 1 is certainly an item. The extinguishing of the old road is certainly an item. The 50-foot setback from the river is certainly an item. The trail realignment is certainly an item, which a lot of these we'd be better served having a site visit, but I'm not so sure that staff is going to be able to come back with a proper change to some of these items for us to really make a decision on the 14th. So it may be continued again from that point, is kind of what I'm saying. Now, I don't know what people feel is best for the site visit in terms of having a structured site visit up there, or in terms of individually taking this map and walking up the road and the trail and seeing.
They have to be together.
Yeah, we would need staff there. I think it needs to be a formal site visit for this.
So the question is, can we schedule something before the 14th? I guess that lies in.
I can't, I can't do it.
So I guess the answer to that is
when are all of you getting back in town from?
the 5th.
You're back the 5th? You're going somewhere, George, next week?
Yeah.
And when are you going to be back?
It's just not possible.
It's not going to work, so.
No, I'm looking at the week, maybe the 7th or the 8th of May, possibly, for a site visit.
I have a meeting on the 7th, and I think it's down in Denver, so I don't think I'd be back up on the 8th. So.
And how about the next week?
No,
what I'm looking at is if we had the continuation to May 28th instead of June 11th.
We have the celestial hearing on May 28th, which is going to be a very, very long agenda item.
Yeah, that will be long.
4 years in the making.
No.
So I would suggest continuing this, as said, to the 11th, planning a site visit on the 21st, 22nd, or 23rd, if any of those dates work for the commissioners.
None of those 3 dates will work for me. It's on our schedule already, but I'm out as of the 15th through the 26th, Memorial Day weekend, with the Western Interstate Region meeting in Alaska. Yeah. And so, we can look at our schedules together collectively, separate for this, for finding a site visit time, but something like the 29th might work of May for me, or we can maybe fit it into one of our work session agendas on a Tuesday, which we're not all full, but we need to work with our manager on that as well.
Maybe on the 13th or something, possibly.
Or the 27th.
A couple of the work sessions were just about empty. I don't remember.
Yeah.
Okay, so
we have to continue this and set the site visit separately. Is the only way we're going to be able to proceed.
So we have a motion from Rachel and a second from Michael to continue this item until date certain June 11th, 2014. Any further discussion on that? Any further comments on this issue before we take a vote?
They're going to have managers.
Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you for taking the diligent time on this. Let's take a 15-minute break. And before we take that break, Lance, are you okay if we do pro race before the cell tower?
Sure. I'm here.
If they're here, if they're around.
Yeah. If we can find them.
Okay. Let's come back at 4:55.
And for the pro site.
Yes.
Great. Thanks.
April 23rd. This is the Board of County Commissioners, Pickens County regular meeting. We are going to move into our land use actions. Temporarily, we're going to skip over one of our public hearing items, which is the cell tower amendments, so that we can slightly accommodate the very, very patient people from the Pro Cycling Challenge. And Mike Kramer is here to present the conceptual submission for a special event permit application.
Okay, thank you. The applicant is the City of Aspen, and this is the application for a major special event permit review for the 2014 USA Pro Cycling Challenge. This is the 4th year, if you can believe it, of this event, and the proposed dates for the event are Stage 1, Monday, August 18th, and Stage 2, Tuesday, August 19th. And as we all know, this is a race that goes throughout the county. In this year, we'll be doing Stage 1 and Stage 2, but it goes on to ride throughout Colorado then. But basically what staff wanted to do was bring this major special event permit review to the board as we promised. And if you remember, we had a work session in January and we talked about the Pro Cycling Challenge. And in that work session, staff tried to outline some items that needed to be addressed for review of this permit, and part of this was to bring a conceptual review to the Board of County Commissioners. And if you remember from our land use code, special event permits are actually administrative reviews by ComDev staff. And typically what happens is that an application comes in, staff either convenes a special event committee or emails out the proposal, we receive comments, and then we issue a permit with conditions then. And the same goes for this, except in this case, the board will be seeing the conceptual review of the application. But Stage 1, basically in this event application, as I said, on August 18th, would occur from approximately noon to 4 p.m., and it's a 3-lap circuit race. And as last year, it would be doing laps through the City of Aspen to Town of Snowmass Village, and then back into Aspen on county roads. Stage 2, the next day, would start in Aspen, go down Highway 82 through the town of Carbondale, and then up and over 133 and McClure Pass onward to Crested Butte. So what staff did was convene the special event committee. We did a joint meeting with the City of Aspen, and we referred the application out to all the HOAs, the caucuses, neighborhood groups. We invited the town of Carbondale, town of Snowmass Village, town of Basalt, contacts for Eagle County, so that all jurisdictions could participate if they wanted to in the review of the special event application. So that has occurred already, and staff has outlined some items that we think should be brought up, and the board, if they feel they need to, set limits on. You can see in the staff memo that our land use code is quite, I should say, small in the special events criteria section. We talk about the need for adequate public parking and site setup and maintenance and public safety and availability for emergency services, and those are all very important things. And all items at special events have to be reviewed pursuant to. But in this case, we thought on page 2 of staff's memo, we have some items there that the board might want to set threshold limits on. And the idea behind this is that this way we have certainty from the applicants for items like road closures or set routes or clearly identified parameters for closure of the Pickens County Airport, clearly outlined parameters for Pickens County Road and Bridge to make the streets in adequate, county roads in adequate condition for the race. So really what we're doing is, in addition to all these items that the land use code requires for safety and egress and public parking and such, we wanted to additionally outline these 7 items. And if the board has threshold limits that are unacceptable, for example, if traffic delays get over a certain time frame, we could set a condition in the permit that the applicant would have to abide by. Another item that we put on here was respect for private property and have a monitoring and cleanup plan so that if the roads get jam-packed and there's trash everywhere, that we have the applicant clean up after the race and it's not a burden on the private property owner. So these are items that staff thought of, and we'd love some direction from the board if there's something that we should add into the resolution and as conditions in our land use permit for this.
Questions for Mike Kramer at this point? Rachel?
Yeah, thank you. And this isn't in your memo. I think it's in one of the first earlier attachments. But related to transportation to the airport, It says that in 2013, the hotels teamed up with a plan to make sure all passengers going to and from the Aspen Airport were accommodated. We hope they will come up with the same plan in 2014. And I'm just wondering, is there more work going to be done to actually help congeal a plan like that and have some assurances that it could happen? It seemed to be done well on the fly, but I don't think it should be on the fly this year. And you know, we can get a much better idea of how many vehicles are really needed out there. It shouldn't be that, you know, if you have extra space, you'll take 3 and you leave before you filled up. But, I mean, I think we need a really solid plan for about how people get to and from the airport during this.
Yeah, agreed. And that's certainly something we can ask the applicant for, how they plan on doing that. The airport's been referred on the application, and I know that Nancy and the city have been working with the airport to develop something like that. So we can ask them.
Okay, thank you.
George?
Along with that, I see a representative from RAPTA here, but somehow a plan needs to include the ability to address all the concerns that RAPTA has in terms of transporting people back and forth, and how that's just going to be facilitated during the race.
Yeah, that RAPTA is referred on the application. We can let them answer that question too.
I mean, I'll chime in on some of these 7 items, because the first one, you just say, you know, set a route for both days the public can rely on. And I think that's really a 60,000-foot thing, and we want to get it down to like a 20,000 feet, a route of where all the openings and closures are going to be, what time. One of the things, you know, just reflecting on last year, that I found, you know, I thought the race was a fabulous race, and I'm glad we're doing it again. I will continue to say that so that the press doesn't pick up them booing anything, as they have in the past, I would say, is that it's this pretty much the same route as we had before, and we should have learned a lot from that, and we should have less closures now because of what we know from that, and we should be pre-prepared from the knowledge that we gained last year, so that RAFTA or the airport shuttles know how to operate and know when to operate, and they work with the bike race. And to relate back to what I was going to say, the frustrating thing last year was, I think when we had this meeting, we had it a little bit earlier, we had it in February or March, the response of medalists was, there'll be rolling closures and people will get to the airport. 2 months later, the response was, and I know some routes changed and some safety issues changed, but 2 months later, it was, it's going to be closed from noon to 4, you know, with no exceptions. Closer to the race, it was, we will find ways to get buses through, and that was great that they expanded in that direction. So I really think, number one, should be much more specific than, you know, what are the routes on the race. It should be exactly what rolling closures will there be, exactly, you know, where the time frames of these things are, and where the accessible and traffic delays are, which is kind of leading into number 2. I mean, it really has to be as specific as we possibly can, with the caveat that, you know, this is a race, things change, and times of how fast they bike and all that changes, and safety comes first. I think our public understands that safety comes first. But I think this is a good way of looking at it. These are the thresholds that we as the board are putting in place for quality of life for approval of this permit. And I think that was worded well by staff. Additional comments? Rachel?
Yeah, a question. Do we know, is the MAA closing day the 17th, Sunday the 17th again?
Yes.
We all regret that. But I mean, that seemed to have been one of the big issues we heard feedback from afterwards, was people, musicians who, you know, needed to catch a flight the very next day and were unable to get to the airport or unaware. And, you know, I think that there should be a direct meeting with the MAA to talk to them about their personnel and all the students and things like that, for that matter, who all were trying to fly out, get back to college, get back to their families. Their lodging has ended. You know, I don't think they have extended lodging to just stay for an extra couple of days. So that's something that is of concern to me. And, you know, when we did our debrief before, I had brought it up, but really, you know, what type of arrangements can we make for the people who have professional offices in Aspen and are not benefited directly, per se, by tourism activities, whether it's medical doctors or chiropractors or, you know, service industries that are separate from the tourism industry. How do they, you know, let their people know? A lot of them just, you know, have had to cancel business for 2 days but still pay rent 30 days a month. And I don't know that we've looked to find something for them. I mean, I made suggestions before, and they may have seen off the track, but, you know, could we use some of the electric golf cart type things that they have at the meadows and shuttle people up and down through our trails to be able to get people in and out of town for the business they need to do? Or do we compensate those folks who've had to close their offices for 2 days who don't benefit by, you know, sales tax increases? But I just don't see anything to address those issues yet.
Michael. To add on to that, you know, at our hearing for the Elam gravel pit renewal, the applicant brought up that they're closing for the entire day, or they expect to.
Yeah.
I mean, there's considerable community sacrifice, and there's considerable community gain, but the two parties aren't the same.
That's right.
So, at least not directly the same. So I'm not sure how to resolve that. I mean, if a major operation like a gravel pit that has numerous trucks and numerous construction activities closes for an entire day, are we expected to reimburse them? Or is the race going to reimburse them? Or, I mean, I don't know. What do we do about that? Do we just accept it? I don't know. Those are questions I'm posing. I don't know the answers to.
Yeah, and that, I feel like I need to reiterate, I support the event. It's a great event, and it brings a lot of recognition to town. And, you know, the people who've been planning this 2014 started the day after the last one ended, you know, and I don't mean to say this as a kibosh, but I really would like to see us do whatever we can to reduce the sacrifice side of those residents who are not directly participating.
George?
I don't know how we could do that, and you know, our economy is you know, you have secondary and third levels in terms of benefits, and so if we support an event like this that's going to get national and international exposure, what it brings to the community through sales tax dollars is a trickle-down effect, and that trickle-down effect does reach the service industry, it does reach the professionals at some point. It may not be as high as the direct dollar, the first dollar, but they'll get the second or the third or the fourth dollar, and that happens with any activity, any event. So there are sacrifices, and I don't know how else we can resolve it if we're going to have an event like this on an annual basis. So that's all I'll say on that.
Steve?
I would like a clearer picture on how the rolling roadblock on Highway 82 will be on the second day of the race. If both directions of Highway 82 are going to be closed, does that mean it's going to be closed at Catherine's store? Up Valley traffic held up for 2 hours from the race start until the bicyclers are going by, or exactly what? And it doesn't really go into the detail on here, but the first day of the race we know pretty much what to expect because it's the same route, and it'll probably be very similar to last year in terms of the impacts and how you have to travel to get around, make your travel arrangements early and get there earlier. Second day is still an unknown to me, and I can't quite picture how it works. Like, will there be county sheriff's deputies deployed at all the different little side roads coming in, or are we going to have volunteers out there, or is the highway patrol going in front of the racers going to be pulling people over, or how does it work? I can't envision it.
Yeah. I could try and partially answer some of that, but I think we better let Nancy and Medalist try and explain the road closures. I had a good understanding a few months ago, and I think that might have changed over the course of the planning, so we can ask them those questions.
Yeah.
2 years ago, one of the things that I asked for was a, kind of like a flip chart map of this is the section that's going to be closed with the time period as kind of a time-lapse map. I know 82 is going to be challenging because, and I'm sure Medalist will talk to this, because there are sections where there isn't a divider and they can't put a fence down the middle, so they can't have traffic coming up valley as the race is going down valley. They have to do a full closure, and that's kind of a little unfortunate that that's the case. So, and traffic going down valley isn't that much of a problem because you're following the direction of the race. But I think if there was some sort of flip time-lapse map that showed, this is the part that's going to be closed the first 20 minutes, the next 20 minutes, the next 20 minutes, so you can see where it opens up. Rachel, you were going to add something?
Yeah, there's clearly different issues related to day one versus day two. That's part of it, and we need to kind of break those apart to solve them. And, George, I just want to say I agree with you in terms of an overall benefit through the tourism cycles. But, as I said, I'm just trying to look for how can we lessen the sacrifice of those who are not as directly related. And I have wondered, could we have buses that are identified that are going to leave Brush Creek Intercept Lot, the last 15 minutes before the road gets closed to get people into town, and all those people who come in on those know that they can catch a bus that will leave for given breaks, even if they have to stop in the middle and then continue to get them back to their cars at Brush Creek. But how do we tell the public who still wants to use the other business or services of town, how do you travel? It's more that we've told everyone you can't leave your driveway after this period of time, or you can't do this, or you can do this. But what message do we give that public, and how do we try to accommodate their needs to the extent possible?
I think some of the economic aspects of this, that these questions and the answers to these questions would help so greatly, is that I do think that there's a large percentage, or not a large, there's a percentage of town that say, I'm just not going to deal with it, I'm not going to go to Aspen. And for every person that you bring into town, if there's one that says, I'm not going to go to Aspen, well, they're not having lunch somewhere, they're not buying something in a store, they're not doing this. So the better we figure out these problems, the more we capture those people that say it's not a hassle. I could name dozens of my friends that leave town for X Games. They don't want to be here for X Games. It's a pain in the butt. So they lose business because of, those people aren't spending money here. There's tourists that come in for it, but anyway. Should we bring Nancy and have her introduce some of her team and present whatever they'd like to present? If everyone can just state their name for the record and introduce the group.
Yeah, Rob, I'm Randy Reedy, Assistant City Manager, and I'm prepared to kind of introduce this, kind of piggyback off of some of Mike's comments. And we had some group members here earlier that had to leave, but we do have a representative of RAFTA, a couple representatives, John Honker and Dave Iverson, here to answer some RAFTA questions. We do have, and did have Mike Scanlon, the Basalt Town Manager. We did have Brian Griefey of the airport here, and Alex from the Sheriff's Office, who did have to leave because his shift had ended. But We're pleased that Chuck Hodge from Medalist Sports has joined us from South Carolina and able to represent many of the route and public safety questions that you all have had. And of course, Nancy and Leslie will be able to address many of the other public outreach and route and some of the other questions that have come up as well. So we'll go over that. We are happy to be here to be able to represent this application. It is, as Mike represented, the fourth year of this. We're here to thank you for this opportunity. On behalf of the City Council, Mayor of the City of Aspen, it's an opportunity that we don't take lightly. It's a large event. It does take a very large team to present, an incident management team that's composed of dozens of individuals from throughout the Upper Valley. And it's the second year, an unprecedented opportunity to present the overall start. The only reason that's happened is because of the welcoming that this Upper Valley has presented to the race. So as Mike represented, there were on January 28th 7 sort of threshold or trigger issues that you all identified that we're prepared to represent for you, kind of tell you where we're at with those, give you some focus on those that are much less of a 60,000-foot level, and touch in on those and let you know where we're at. As far as the set route for both days, Chuck Hodge from Medalist Sports will cover that. Acceptable time frames for traffic delays, that kind of piggybacks on top of that. Chuck will touch on that. Alex was prepared to comment on that as far as how that went last year and the Sheriff's Office and the incident management team's preparation for that this year. 100% access to the hospital, that was something that occurred last year and something that's very much taken into heart for this year as well. Gabe Muthing, representing the hospital, is very much on the incident management team and part of that. Accommodations for the airport, something that we're working with Pat Bingham of your staff on, the airport staff as well, RAFTA, and the lodge vans, as Rachel mentioned earlier. Pickens County Road and Bridge, work requirements for them should be known by July 15th. That's very much part of the requirements, and Chuck can represent that. Respect for the private property all along the race course, making sure there's a development of a monitoring and cleanup program, that those properties are respected, that the application represents how that'll be happening, and cleanup after the race, of course, is part of this. And then full sign-off of the Pickens County Sheriff's Office before this race proceeds. We wouldn't think of proceeding otherwise. And lastly, when we spoke to you in January, Commissioner Newman asked the question about, why not on that second day get off of the highway a little more, go either on Lower River Road or otherwise to go down Valley. That's something that the race officials took very seriously and have given a great deal of consideration to, and Nancy can give an update on kind of some of the developments there, how those considerations have led to some, what we think are some exciting turns of events. And the Basalt Town Manager was here to kind of represent that and kind of let you know where that stands. So in summary, we'll be talking about some route issues, some public safety and outreach issues, and kind of where we're at with the overall race and course issues. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chuck.
Great, thanks. Good to be back this year. I'm Chuck Hodge from Metal Sports. I'm the technical director for the event. I've been asked to come in and give you a briefing of the courses and the other items that we just discussed. Be happy to answer any questions. First of all, thanks for having us back again this year. I think I told everybody last year that we like coming here. Personally, I love coming here, and we always want to be welcome back. So whatever we need to do on our end to make sure that happens in the future is what we want to discuss today. Going into the race courses for next year, Stage 1, the Monday race, which is the circuit race, utilizing downtown Snowmass Village and the county roads, we ended up being very happy with last year. I know we had a lot of discussion with you all internally with a lot of the stakeholders last year. Obviously had some changes back and forth, and I think really ended up in the end with a great product. As I think I stated, if not in here, definitely to the police and other incident managers, it will be very conservative the first year. Everywhere we go, just talking to RAFT outside earlier today, they've already identified some things they can do. So to your point, I think we will probably see that happen. I'm a little bit at the mercy of law enforcement and the experts on the actual road closures, but just throwing that out there. I did pull the results up from last year. At the finish of the race, we were 14 minutes from our winner to our final rider across the line. I think I'd said 15, so I let out a big sigh of relief when I read that. And we were looking really at the same type of race for that stage this year. One item when I talk about both of these events is we have just started getting the times for our TV windows back and actually have an internal call Monday. That is going to influence the start and finish times of the event. So the times I give you today could fluctuate next week by 20, 30 minutes. We will get those hopefully done next week and out to everybody. There's also a slight course change from what we've looked at for Stage 2 I'll address, which are going to reflect that. But right now, for the first day, we're looking at that 1:05 start, finishing just before 4 o'clock. And we'll provide these updated logs. I've got the temporary ones in front of me here. We'll provide those back to all the interested parties here in town. And certainly, I'll continue on to Stage 2. Feel free to ask any questions on one. I'm sure you'll have some items when I finish up. Stage 2 is going to be new for us and for you all as well. We actually, I'd heard the comments about River Road, some of the other ways out of town, and we actually had some of those in our original course logs and our original routes leaving. There are obviously a huge number of stakeholders involved in pulling a race like this off. And we sat down in January with the State Patrol and CDOT in Denver and went through each of these routes. It was actually State Patrol and CDOT who came back and really wanted to see us move on to 82. And I'll go over some of those reasons later, but I think in the end it'll make for a much more efficient race getting out of the area, and we'll end up with less road closures than you might think. So I'll discuss that here in a moment. The other issue that's just come up, good issue that's come up in the last week is BOCC has approached the race. And we're here earlier today to talk to you all about bringing the race through town. We always welcome what we call pass-through communities to host the event. We have been working with Carbondale, rerouted a little bit based on some road construction in town. And leaving here today, I'm going to go into BOCC and relog that section of course and take a look at it from our point of view. But the current plan is we would actually leave 82, go through downtown, and then come back on the 82. So that's going to influence these routes as well. So the current course we're looking at, and I'm going to give you a placeholder time of 11 o'clock for a start time, knowing that could change. It's not going to change to a 9 a.m. or a 2 p.m. hopefully. I think we're still looking at the same 4 p.m. off-air time for our TV, and we're going to back time the start based on that finish time. So using that placeholder of 11, just to give you an idea, we're looking at the same 2 short start circuits in town that we've used in the past when we've gone over Independence Pass. I can't name all those roads off the top of my head, but I've got them all written down. We'll be heading out 82 and taking the right on Cemetery Lane and essentially following the previous day's route backwards, out McLean Flats Road, Smith Way, and that is where we got into discussions with CSP and CDOT, and we have decided from their end it'd be much more efficient and easier to take a right turn on 82 there and head down Valley. With the change into BOCC, I'll get that into the logs, but that's currently, we're fine with it and they're very willing to go that way. Back on 82, out of the county and making a left onto Catherine Store Road and working our way back through Carbondale. We will jump back into Pitkin County on 133 as we head over McClure Pass and down and doing some dirt riding into Crested Butte over Kevlar Pass. A little bit about the road closures on 82, and unfortunately Captain Duran from CSP could not be here today and Deputy Bruchette had to leave. I'm going to give you what I've talked to the captain about and how we generally operate. And again, I'm a little bit at the mercy of the public agencies of how we handle this. The intention is to, I heard earlier, try to reduce the bad and increase the good. We will let traffic flow. We have no issues with traffic flowing up toward town on the divided sections of road. I think that's pretty much a given. Anytime there's a physical divider, we're just going to let traffic come the other way. It was referenced, there are definitely several locations as we head down the valley where we lose that. One thing on those shorter breaks we've talked to CDOT about is doing some cone lines or other delineation in the middle of the road to possibly keep traffic open. But I'll give you a couple of sort of worst case scenarios about how we've generally handled that in the past. When we have, for instance, a 2-mile section of road with no divider, ran some math before the meeting. What CSP would do is block the inbound traffic toward Aspen as we approach that section. To give you an idea, at a 50-mile-an-hour, 60-mile-an-hour speed limit, it's going to take a car about 3 or 4 minutes to traverse that 2-mile section of road. So they would hold the cars, let that section of 2 miles bleed out. That takes about 3 or 4 minutes. At the speeds we're going to be going down, 30 miles an hour, it's going to take us about 4 minutes to ride 2 miles. So for a 2-mile section of road with no divider, you're talking about a 10 to 15-minute delay. Now, I'm throwing those numbers out. They are sitting down, they being CDOT and CSP, and really working hard on the planning of this. To the point about getting the closures down, that's in the development process. They very clearly understand the need to keep traffic flowing while also keeping the race safe. And that's always a priority with both agencies. As in the past, we're going to advertise this through the CoTrip website as far as CDOT side, and Nancy will speak as far as the local organizing committee about the local notifications there. That's just to give you some ideas. I don't see any need, nor do they, for a 2-hour closure of 82. If we can keep those areas of conflict to a minimum, either through reroutes or short closures or delineations, that's certainly our goal, as well as the agencies are. The section of 133, which thankfully is much less traffic, is very similar to some of the other passes, such as Monarch, that we've done in the past. The thought there, or the way that that's been handled in the past, is it'll be a much longer closure. However, it will not be as strict because of the less traffic flow on those sections of road. That will actually probably start over on the other side of the pass in Gunnison County near Paonia with closures over there. However, traffic has always been allowed to flow between the local roads. So if I'm leaving my house to go to my business a mile down the road, and this could be a several-hour light closure, that'll be allowed to happen up until the race gets to that point. And that's the kind of closure we're doing with the CSP units in front of the race, and maybe literally stopping cars at pullouts every mile, getting them pulled over. We should be by quickly and let them resume their day. The nice thing with us leaving, unlike Independence Pass, is we should be a very quick and compact race leaving town. Unlike going over the pass and shattering over 20 minutes of road immediately and making my life hard, this should be a very compact peloton, as you all really saw the first lap of the race last year, and should move very quickly down the valley. Not that there won't be impacts, but that's something to consider when thinking about that. A few other items that have been brought up that we've actually been working on. One is just what I call the restoration and the cleanup after the race. We do have a feed zone that will not be in the county for stage 2. That was on Owl Creek last year. We are looking seriously. Our international governing body, the UCI out of Switzerland, has a new green initiative and are very much pushing race directors to consider the environment and consider recycling, et cetera. One thing we've looked at that we're going to work on implementing this year at this race is a drop zone, we call it, for the riders. So they take their food and beverage from that feed zone on Owl Creek. Right now we sort of had to go just clean it up wherever it lay. The nice thing is the fans generally take care of the water bottles for us. They end up on mantles. What's been instituted a lot internationally is a half a kilometer, 1 kilometer area that's designated for riders to drop those materials roadside and have us go and clean up afterwards. So that's something that we are going to integrate. There's actually now certification from the UCI for races for that, which I think we're going to work on moving towards. We also have instituted some special regulations with this race, one of which is an increased fine for riders littering. It's one thing when there are fans around and they're going to grab that water bottle, so that's a prized possession. When we're out in the middle of nowhere and I see a water bottle get chucked, that's something we can actually fine the riders for at this point. And we have seen actually a very conscientious effort for the riders to with the younger generation coming in, they're dropping stuff in teen cars and handing it off to race officials instead of just dropping it roadside. So I think I've hit most of the points, certainly open to questions from you all on any of the stages or any other items.
Steve?
What happens out on the highway or on any road when if a car is encountered that's not supposed to be out there, going in either direction?
Yeah, and I joke around, I didn't mention this earlier, going down Valley, the car going concurrent to us is how we describe it. We're going to be moving at 30 miles an hour. The speed limit's generally 50 miles an hour. As we make the right turn onto 82, that traffic is going to outrun us. So we stop it generally a minute or two before we get there to make sure we have that buffer, and we just let it flow away from us. Anyone coming in behind us is, as I say, following the world's largest RV, and it's going to get stuck doing 30 miles an hour, unfortunately. It is only a 40 to 45 minute run from us on 82, so it's not a super long period of time. The bigger question, what happens with traffic coming the other way? And it's not just out on the open highways, it's someone coming out of the driveway in town. We run a buffer, as you may have seen last year. We keep it a little shorter here, actually, in town on the circuit, but out on the open road, that buffer with CSP and our motor marshals can be 5 to 10 minutes ahead very easily. And in that window, there is essentially always a law enforcement or motor marshal presence there. And the goal being that we always encounter that car coming the other way on the worst possible point with no shoulder and a guardrail, and we can't get them off. That's a time and space buffer for us. So when we encounter that car, it gives us the ability to move them down the road a little bit and pull them off in the appropriate location. We will also generally stage the CSP motors ahead of their cars, and they're looking for those pull-outs, and they're going to just stop there and let the cars come to them, pull them in a safe location, and move down the road. So it's a layered defense is the best way to put it. It takes a lot to actually get back to where the routers are. Probably the worst fear is just more than a car coming out of the way of someone pulling out of the driveway. And that's why we attempt to always have that constant stream of law enforcement and motor marshals looking for those cars pulling out. And it's not just cars, it's dogs and everything else you can imagine out there.
Do you use any movable barriers in front of some of the roads? Driveways or?
We do sometimes in town, and really the reason we don't out on what I call the open road is that we move so quickly that by the time you deploy a barricade, and this goes for a lot of traffic control, by the time you deploy that and pull it up, you've interrupted public travel as much as the race going by. So when we get to throwing out big Type 3 huge barricades across roads and then having to drag them out or having to delineate and split roads, the race would have already been by. So we do it a lot more with bodies than we do with equipment. And there are certainly areas for equipment, especially message boards that CDOT uses, and in certain locations we do that.
George? Do you have a route set right now for going in and out of Basalt?
I have not been through, but what and I'm doing this off strict memory without having seen it, is I think Two Rivers Road off through town and just back on the 82.
Right back out versus going down to Aspen Junction and getting back on 82?
Two Rivers Road all the way down.
To Aspen Junction.
Is that what that...
North Two River Roads, too.
Yeah. As opposed to coming back out by the library and the post office.
Right. Continuing through town, we were looking at putting a sprint line, as we're doing in Carbondale as well, and then continuing past that. I'll know the roads about 6 o'clock tonight when I get done driving.
So there are speed bumps on that other side of Basalt going down.
Yeah, and
is that any problem for the racers?
We actually have some, and that's one reason I've given them the tentative okay, but I'm going through tonight to take a look at everything. And again, this has just come up in the last 3 or 4 days to add this in.
So that when you have, as the racers are going up 133 from Carbondale heading over to McClure's, where you just have a 2-lane road, and you've got traffic coming all the way from Paonia over McClure's Pass, how do you time that in terms of what would you anticipate the holdup for the cars heading north?
What we look at, as I described a little earlier, is the transit time for a car from the last possible pull-off into Carbondale, and how long will it take a slow car to drive that, and then how long will it take us to transit that route? And it honestly, it can be a couple hours easily of that transit time. That's one reason CDOT takes a very interactive approach with that, with message boards. They do a notification of the trucking companies. They use the CoTrip website. The goal being that we just, instead of having to stop a car every mile in a dangerous situation, is we're giving them an alternative before they get into that situation of being stuck for a bit. Again, concurrent traffic can move with us. And that local traffic, there will be no one stopping them. Traffic between Carbondale and the county line, we're mainly worried with that flow-through traffic coming all the way over from the other side and from Gunnison County. Traffic moving will be interrupted when we get there, but that'll be a much shorter time frame. And that's how we've handled generally Hoosier Pass, Monarch Pass, those locations in the past. Great. Thanks for having this.
Like you've thought things through more and more every year.
A lot of work to do, and I don't want you to think this isn't being worked on every day. There was another question about the need for county roads to do work. We're going to come back out in June. We have a major event in California in May that's kept us quite busy. As soon as that's over, we're going to be out in June doing some route trials with our folks. That would be a time we would look at it. We're certainly not asking to repave roads. However, after the winter hits, there's always the potholes, and those are the kind of things we'll look at fixing. Also, in the second week of May, CDOT and CSP are driving all the routes, and we'll be digging a lot more into these closure towns, and Captain Duran is an integral part of that, and be coming back with those plans, and we'll have agency meetings in June starting on that process.
And I have other questions, but I think they're more for Leslie and others.
Great.
Thank you.
Turn it over to them.
Do you have anybody else that wants to present anything, or you just want to field questions at this point?
However you guys would like to do it. We did have a couple other people to present, but as Randy said, they had to leave.
Questions then?
Okay. Well, thank you, Leslie, for being here and your work. I just kind of wanted to get back to that day one of people getting in and out of town. Mm-hmm. And are you working to coordinate the hotel vans and have a meeting of the lodging association so we don't have more than we need out there? We don't send any vans back with just one or two people? How's that occurring?
We are, and when we reached out to the hotels, what they said is, you know what, can we please get through the winter? And then let us, a lot of them were closing for the off season, and then what they wanted to do is meet kind of when summer started and when their actual staffs who would be there, driving the vehicle and actually working with us would be the ones in. So we absolutely plan on doing that. You're right, I think for something that really happened on the fly, it happened really well, but we learned some great information from it, and we do plan to take that back to everybody and meet with them and get a really, solid plan in place, hopefully by the end of June. It's going to be kind of tricky with food and wine, but that is absolutely part of it.
Yeah, part of it last year seemed to be people buying their tickets, their airline tickets, and then not knowing that they were going to be stuck at the airport for a period of time and either not able to check into the hotel, not able to make a dinner reservation, or whatever else they'd planned. And I just don't know how we get the information in advance to people who are buying tickets on, to fly out or in on Monday the 18th.
And I'm sorry, Brian's not here from the airport. The airport, I believe off the top of my head, there were maybe 5 impacted flights, but they felt kind of the 2 on the outer ends were fine. So there were really 3 impacted flights. And the airline representatives at the airport actually called each of the people on those airlines. So they did get, I want to say 2 or 3 weeks before they all got some sort of personal notification from the airlines about this.
Yeah, but it's too late to change your ticket to another day, and
I don't know what I wasn't in on those calls, so I don't know what they offered.
And then are we trying to make some sort of arrangement so that people can come in town to do business? I mean, how because it's just not a new question, and I'm just the one asking it, but how do offices and professionals who need to have people come in for appointments deal with the closures?
So we go as a team, we kind of split up town into little sections, and we go and we physically walk in to each business that has kind of appointments, and whether they get a flyer, and then we ask if they have any questions. And if they do say, hey, I want to stay open, we work with them. There was actually a hair salon in town that was right on the closed road that stayed open, and we checked in with them afterwards, and everybody made their appointment on time. And so I think we don't go in and say, you have to close. We go in and say, here's the impacts, this is what's happening on this day, do you have any questions? And then if they have questions, we'll further assist them on brainstorming ways in which to help them stay open. We do get a lot of people who say, we're super excited for the bike race, are you kidding, we're closing it, we're watching.
Right.
We can hardly wait.
But would you then have buses from, say, the Brush Creek Intercept lot that are, scheduled to be some of the last couple of buses for people who need to make work, and give them a flyer to say, well, look, if your clients are still coming in, this is the bus for them to get in, because there's not going to be any parking in town anyhow?
We give them as much information as we possibly can, yes.
And you will have some of those departure buses at the, as close to the actual closer as possible.
We'll work with RAFTA, yep, and see what they feel that they can handle.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, we did meet with the Music Associates.
Okay.
We did last year, and we have again this year, and so last year they had said that they had it kind of on all their information starting really when everybody was signing up through the end, and they felt that it really went actually quite well, and they're going to repeat that process. But we did meet. We have met on our very first of many meetings that we'll have with them already.
Thank you.
Additional questions for Nancy or anybody?
I'll just ask John from RAPTA, because you actually will have 2 days that's going to really impact your schedule. The second day, because, of course, you're having buses coming up from Rifle all the way up to Aspen on that day, and where do you see the challenges, or how are you going to try to address, knowing what happened last year, how to sort of improve on that service for everyone who, as Rachel says, who wants to get into town to get to work or get to an appointment?
I'm John Harkin from RAF. I was talking to Chuck outside Nancy. Day one, we just have to tweak a few things if we have that down, because we've been through it. And the impacts weren't that great. We just had a couple of hiccups after the roundabout, but like that. But after talking to Chuck and Nancy, if the rolling closure is 15 minutes, around that, or 20 minutes, I don't really see an impact whether you're coming up valley or down valley on a bus. And that's what it sounds like it'll be. Is that correct? About a 15-minute rolling closure. So, wherever the race catches us coming up, the bus will pull off, people on it. I don't see that as long as we do the PR on it. And I think being 11 o'clock start, that's an off-peak time for us, so we don't have a lot of demand at that time. That's a good thing. But it's kind of new to us. This rolling closure is new to us, because especially the parts of the highway, there's going to be closures on both sides of the highway. At first, I thought we could just come up valley, no problem. Down valley would be the closure, but as Chuck said, wherever there's divided highway, we keep moving and so forth. So I don't think, if it's true that there's 15-minute, maybe 20-minute closures, I don't think that's going to be too bad, because last year with the first day, the stage first day, some of the stops for the buses were longer than that, and we didn't have a lot of pushback from our riding public, because I thought the electronic signs up and down the highway warn people that expect delays during these times. If we get a good, Nancy and her team get a good PR push out, I think our riders will know that if they're riding buses during that time, there could be a 15-20 minute either way. And it sounds like going down valley, the delay will be a little less. People will actually be following the peloton and the caravan, so people can see that we're moving behind it, albeit slow, but at least moving. Coming up you might ask, why are we pulling over at Catholic Star? They didn't get the memo, so to speak, beforehand. And I think you went all the way down Valley with right by the signs. Did you go on I-72?
We did for your bus stops too. We put
Most of those bus stops.
at all the bus stops.
So you'll be getting some information out at least a week prior, so people can make adjustments on their schedules, knowing that if they have to be in town by noon, they may have to catch an earlier bus to allow for that extra 15 or 20 minutes, so they're not late for work or late for an appointment.
So I think if the closures are only 15, 20 minutes, the rolling closure, day 2, I think it'll go well. So longer than that, our customers will be asking questions. So,
Rachel?
Just to follow up on that, John, and thanks for being here and being patient all day. On day 1, the traffic RAFTA, either going in town or out of town, will basically move in pulses, and so they would be able to get to the Brush Creek turn off to Smith Hill and then maybe have to stop, and then when the races have all gone by, they could proceed up to past the airport and to the roundabout, but then have to wait until Cemetery Lane comes in, if that part's closed, and then pulse into town. And the same thing leaving. So there's not a total closure for transportation. It would just happen in pulses based on the traffic that's backed up and how many cars can get through safely before they need to close it down again. Describe it.
A bus gets stopped at Smith Way, say, coming up Valley, when you were crossing Highway 82 last year.
Yeah.
That bus possibly could get all the way into town without stopping again, because the races are at that point
not as fast. Yeah.
So depending on what bus you're on, what time, if the races got really spread out, then, but as Chuck said, I think it was 14 minutes was it. So that helped us.
Yeah.
If the Peloton stretched out by a half hour, I think it
be different.
It'd be bigger delays. So if all that works the same, I think it'll be fine.
Thank you.
Additional questions?
At a procedural level, you're asking us, Mike, for a vote to approve the conceptual review, and then you would end up issuing the final permit later.
That's correct. You have a draft resolution for conceptual review of this application, and staff roughly outlines some conditions in that approval too. So the thought is that if any of these conditions need tweaking from the board, if we want to fine-tune these, we certainly can. But if any of these conditions the applicant just categorically could not comply with, staff could then update the board in a detailed submission then also, and work with the applicant to comply with them. But if everything is kosher and we like the way this resolution is written, staff could issue the final approval prior to the race then.
Mike, let me ask the question of what the procedural aspects are to remedy if these things change, because that was kind of the fall through last year, and it wasn't anybody's fault. It was just happened because the incident management team kind of took over after our preliminary approval, and then some changes happened, and we didn't really know about them. So they kind of went against our preliminary approval, i.e. the course being changed and some of the closures changing that were presented to us differently. Will we have I know we have the sheriff as a representative on the incident management team. How will we get that information back to us to react to it, I guess, would be a way of saying that.
So there's two ways that we're going to handle exactly what you're talking about. One is that Nancy, as you all know, has been meeting with you at work sessions every 2 weeks. And Nancy's going to continue to do that with the board and update you all on the race planning. And there are going to be tweaks and changes, as there always are for large events like this, and Nancy's going to continue to do that. So that's one way, so that if there are any changes that happen during these work sessions that Nancy's at, you'll all be updated on that. Secondly, what staff is going to do is going to give this resolution to the incident management team, and they're going to have a copy of this. And in their race planning, if any of these conditions aren't adhered to or have to change, they're going to notify staff. and then staff can bring it to the board for discussion, review, implementation, or however we want to do it.
Great, and I would probably recommend Nancy in your bi-monthly reviews with us to use this as a guideline as well, you know. But it sounds like the fail-safes are in place for that. I appreciate that very much. Cindy?
I just want to be, community development, I just want to be very clear that on number 2, acceptable timeframes for traffic delays, it says times and duration. Based on what we know today, we will insert the times that we've heard today, and if that changes, because this is a threshold issue for the board, then, as you've heard, there'll be different ways for us to communicate that to you, and you can determine whether or not that threshold can be amended. But those are the things that will trigger us to come back to you, but that would be in the resolution for conceptual approval.
Thank you. I think that's very appropriate, because the idea is, just to kind of state it out in my mind, that you've kind of represented certain guidelines. We know they're going to be within a range, of course, as you've represented them. But if they change dramatically, we want to know about it. If all of a sudden, we hear that there's going to be a huge closure somewhere, we want to know about it. Perfect. I'll accept a motion for this.
Steve? I move to approve a resolution of the Board of County Commissioners of Pitkin County, Colorado, approving the conceptual submission for a special event permit for the 2014 USA Pro Cycling Challenge.
Second.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none. This isn't a public hearing, is it? No. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good luck with everything. A lot of work. Appreciate it.
I'll be back in just a second.
All right. Lance, we're going to move on to back to our public hearing section. Move on to our cell tower.
We have some people from Denver who've been very patient. I'm going to hand out 2 things right now. Last time Steve asked if we could put together a map of existing cell sites, and I did that with some caveats I'll talk about. And then also an additional letter from Victoria Chenault, who is sitting right here with the Bush Law Firm. Last time you asked if the representatives from the industry had any comments on the questions and the comments that you had last time, and Victoria has responded to some of those, and we can talk briefly about that. 1 second. So let me just start briefly by going over this map. It's not definitive by any means. We did this pretty quickly, and what I tried to show existing cell sites that we knew about, and by saying we knew about, I mean those that we have in the record of Community Development Department where someone actually made an application for a cell tower, and that cell tower was approved. And that's what this map represents. Only unincorporated Pitkin County, does not include town of Aspen. And by not being definitive, I mean there may be some more sites that somehow slipped through the cracks in our record keeping, or also it's always possible that there's some sites that got built without going through our process. I won't by any means say that there might not be something on the top of Aspen Mountain that someone put up there without going through our process. But essentially, the top of the map being down valley, working toward Aspen. As you can see, there are stars that are over other stars. There are actually 14 existing cell facilities, and some of these stars represent 2 towers on one side, and some stars ended up being over the top of others. But essentially, if you start at the top of the map, down valley, and work up, that first star is a 40-foot stealth tower, a tree on the Morrow property. The next 2 stars on Lower River Road are the towers that are existing behind those existing single-family homes. You just approved one for the Ives property. There's another one on the Royer property. So actually there's 3 facilities at those approved at those 2 homes on Lower River Road. And the star directly across is on the top of Williams Hill. That's a 65-foot tower that AT&T has at the top of Williams Hill. If you move on up valley, the star by McLean Flats Road, that's the 40-foot tree, stealth tree at W/J, right next to the W/J subdivision. Moving up Highway 82, there's quite a few stars, and that represents several sites. There's 2 sites, I believe, at the airport, inside the airport operations building in Tupelo. And across the street in the ABC, there are 2 cell facilities antennas on top of 2 different buildings. Again, one of those you just approved at the top of the animal hospital a couple weeks ago. And then the next star moving up valley is, there are 2 sites, one at the Inn at Aspen, which is a 40-foot tower that's a monopole, and also we recently just approved antenna on the top of the Green Building in Buttermilk. And then the last star there is on Castle Creek Road, which represents antenna on the side of the hospital. When the hospital was in the county, before it was annexed, they went through and received approval. So those are the ones that we are aware of. The very good thing about that is that hardly any of these are most people aware of. I think we've done a really good job of having cell towers in locations where they have not been overly visible and in heights that have not really been challenging to us. We have the 165-foot tower on the top of Williams Hill, the 3 40-foot towers, and others are either smaller than that or antenna on buildings. But of course, as you see also, we have not covered the east side of town and the valleys, as we know, Redstone, Meredith, Thomasville, those are still challenges. But anyway, Steve, I wanted you to have that.
Okay, thank you.
And the other item I handed out that I referred to is a letter from, as I said, Victoria Chenault, who responded to some of the questions that we had last time. One of the questions had to do with what is a substantial change, because we talked about putting in the code federal regulations related to certain things that did not constitute a substantial change could be done without a formal review, but could be done with an administrative review. And what is in this letter is just more definition of what substantial change is. I don't think that affects what we've written in the code, because we have used the term substantial change, and obviously we'll follow the appropriate guidelines on that. The other thing brought up was, what about conflicts of wireless communication facilities with other facilities? Because one of the concerns that the industry had was that we had a provision in the current code. It says radio, television, or other electromagnetic transmission or reception on other properties shall not be disturbed or diminished. The concern that the industry had and may want to speak to tonight is that they would prefer that that come out of our ordinance and that Pitkin County not be responsible for making determinations about whether or not someone's radio or television or other transmission ability was deterred or diminished by a new cell facility, that should be dealt with by the FCC, and that's what she has written about there. The other thing that we talked about as a group was Rachel brought up, how do we deal with vacant lots? Because if you'll remember, there's a specific provision in the code that says a freestanding tower shall not be located within 200 feet of an existing residence. And it was brought up, well, how will we deal with existing vacant parcels that have the ability to develop in the future if there is no existing residence? And I've had some difficulty trying to deal with that, and the language I came up with, and then subsequently think I have something better, is I said, in the case of a proposed tower location on a parcel adjacent to an existing vacant developable parcel, the tower shall be located at least 200 feet from the property line of the adjacent vacant parcel. So actually, if that means that if there were a vacant parcel next to a tower, it would get more consideration than if there were a house, because we have said that a tower should not be 200 feet from an existing house. If we said that a tower should not be closer than 200 feet to the property line of a vacant, that means it could be here, it would be more restrictive. So thinking more about that, and after I had written this and had to put this in the packet for you, I thought that perhaps a better way to say that would be that in the case of an existing vacant developable parcel, the setback would have to be a total of 200 feet from the applicable yard setback of the adjacent vacant lot, meaning the closest that a house could be built to its parcel line based on the zoning yard setback. If it's a side yard setback, that would be 30 feet. That would mean that the tower would then have to be 170 feet on the parcel that it's on, so there would be a total of 200 feet from the potential where the house could be built. If it were a front yard setback, that might be 50 feet, whatever. The result being that we would have the same 200 feet. I think that might be a better way to state that, and that's something that came to me after I had written this. The other thing that got changed from what you saw last time was on your scanned page 8B, buffering and screening. It was suggested we add maintenance and maintenance. So I added a paragraph 3. All aspects of wireless communication facilities shall be maintained in the condition and manner as represented and approved. For example, regular painting is expected, and any stealth elements such as branches and limbs shall be replaced as necessary if there is discoloration or deterioration in such elements. That's also something we could put in every special review approval to be sure that we had that. The paragraph above, paragraph 2, if you remember, I had left out some words before. I added those back in. Those were the changes that were made between first reading and second reading. And as I said, the existing questions that would still be out there, I think, would be that paragraph 5 in that same section. Radio, television, or other electromagnetic transmission or reception on other properties shall not be disturbed or diminished. The question would be whether or not to leave that in or to take it out. I think other things have primarily been addressed, and we recommend that you would adopt this proposed code amendment, and with the understanding that there could be a phase 2 where we look at additional changes after we have a little more experience dealing with what we anticipate will be some new and additional and different types of applications from the cell carriers.
Questions to staff?
So, Lance, on that last question you asked, and I read the response regarding any interference in radio or television that's an FCC problem. So, if someone has some interference from the radio reception or TV reception, what would the FCC do? I would suspect we may get the call first, or perhaps I would suspect we may get the call first, and we would then refer to the FCC, and how would they mitigate that problem with the provider?
Perhaps Victoria can respond to that. I actually don't know the process and how that might work. Can we have Victoria respond?
Hi. Hi. Yeah, hold on one second. Michael?
Well, I don't think we have the capacity to know where the interference is coming from. We don't have the technical staff. It could be from anywhere. It could be from fluorescent lights. And so the FCC has people entrusted with that, and they go around inspecting and telling people to turn off their clock radios or lights or whatever it comes from. But we would know what's going on. So why would you come to us? We just don't have that capacity. We don't have a radio frequency department.
No, I'm not saying they should come to us. I'm just saying that we may get the first call, and who would we refer them to? The FCC. Then how would the FCC try to determine what's actually causing that interference?
My first suggestion would
be...
You
just state your name.
Sorry, my name is Victoria Schmaltz. I represent AT&T. I'm in private practice with Bush Law Firm. And so first, thank you all for hearing this matter. And I appreciate Lance and Phyllis's work in this matter. We've collaborated with ATC and Lance and Phyllis in doing this, and it's been a really great effort on everybody's part to try to resolve this so it addresses everybody's interests. But to answer your question, I would recommend first, if it's a resident that's feeling as though there's maybe some interference with a wireless facility or a wireless facility is causing interference, to first call their telecommunications or their cable or radio provider. Because in actuality, the cable, AT&T has licensed frequencies that they're required to operate within, and they pay a ton of money for these frequencies. So it's kind of, they have this license to operate within this frequency, and if a cable provider is leaking into those frequencies, it's their responsibility to resolve that. And if there's still something, if the cable provider determines, well, it's not us, it's actually this wireless facility, then they can communicate, they can contact either the landlord, who has the contact information for the wireless carrier, or they can contact the wireless, or they can contact the FCC directly. There's pretty stringent provisions in lease agreements, standard across the board, that prevents any sort of interference and sets forth how interference should be remedied. And the wireless carrier has RF departments and pretty extensive means to determine how to resolve interference. And usually, interference rarely occurs, but it can be resolved pretty much within a 24-hour period of time. And then if it's not resolved, then you report us to the FCC, and we're subject to substantial fines and penalties. So.
Thank you.
So the question for the board is regarding Section 6B5 on whether or not to omit or to have the inclusion of the language radio, television, and other electromagnetic transmissions or reception on other properties shall not be disturbed or diminished. So the question is, do we keep it in there or do we pull it out?
Well, I'm comfortable with that response from Victoria, so I could pull it out.
I was just going to say, I don't think it hurts to leave it in, but we are not the enforcement mechanism. What strikes me is that we really, at least somewhere, should have the phone number for people how to reach the FCC. I mean, if I could see somebody spending a half hour Googling trying to find the right phone number to reach the right person or the right department. And so, I think it's a matter of public information. But I think it'd be more appropriate to leave that one line in and then add an additional line to say it is the responsibility of the carriers and the FCC to maintain this standard. But all they're doing, is following our codes. Our codes are reiterating what already is the standard federally, and then we could state whose responsibility it is to resolve it in our code.
That's the direction that I would go in. I think we, in a lot of ordinances and land use stuff, we say, and the state code has to be followed, and this has to be followed. And all this is really, maybe just one line after that's saying, as pursuant to the FCC's regulations.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good.
As pursuant to the FCC's regulations. And it's really just saying, we want you to adhere to the FCC regulations.
Sure.
Rachel?
I have a kind of tangential item I wanted to bring up, and I really, to be honest, I'm not sure if it's in here somewhere or not. But I understand from some of the other county commissioners I've been talking to, as we talk about licensed frequencies, that there is an ongoing push to keep narrowing the bandwidth available for emergency services, our communications that we use from our towers, and that because of the mountainous terrain, more narrow bandwidths aren't working. But it's down at the State House and other areas to try to keep making more bandwidth available for public communications, and then lowering the amount available to service, emergency services. And it was coming out of Hinsdale County and a few other counties to saying this is just really bad for us. We just don't have the dependable system, and it could force major upgrades in equipment that emergency responders are supposed to be depending on. And so I guess I just wanted to highlight this as an issue. I can't see really having a clause in here that anyone using this won't become an advocate for narrowing our bandwidth further or anything like that. But I did want people to know that that's really become an issue where a lot of communities are saying, wait a second, we just upgraded 4 years ago. We can't afford to upgrade our equipment yet again and then still have bad reception because the bandwidths are getting so narrow for public service.
Any other questions regarding the cell tower amendments?
Public hearing.
This is a public hearing. I'll open the public hearing at this time. Anybody wishing to speak on this topic may do so at this time. Just present your name and affiliation as you speak, if you're going to speak.
No, as I had said, a lot of the issues that you all brought up last time during the May 9th hearing, I tried to address in the letter that I provided. So it's been, I know that was provided. You probably haven't had a chance to review it, but if there's any additional comments or concerns, my contact information is on the letter. We support and agree with all of Lance's changes. It's been a great collaborative effort. Our one concern that we still do have, and which Lance pointed out for future amendments, or as he referred to it as a stage 2, is the restrictions, still the use restrictions in certain zones, urban growth areas or rural areas. We're seeing that that's where a majority of the gaps are occurring, and so preemptively prohibiting uses in that area when the board will have the latitude to review everything that comes through, is, I think, is an additional hurdle that we're experiencing. So the way I put it is, I think the statistic is from 2006 until 2012, wireless growth has grown 30,000%, and in the last year it's grown up to 50,000% because the majority of people have more than one device. So everything's on Wi-Fi now, so that's our biggest concern. And but aside from that, I mean, we're excited that this is happening and that the board is taking such aggressive measures.
Thank you, and Victoria, I appreciate you putting in the information about the co-locating, because that's definitely a concern. I'm not sure how we address it, but it does seem economical for different carriers to go the co-locating route. Whether they do or not, I think it's something, and I've mentioned it to Phyllis about, really determining whether they do. because the last thing that I'd like to see is 5 properties right next to each other, each with a different cell tower, when it could all be on one. Because what we're trying to do is protect the views into our community and that sort of stuff. But I appreciate you listening during our last meeting and addressing those issues, that one in particular. Anybody else wishing to make public comment at this time? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the board. Rachel?
Well, it's a question for Lance, but Lance, when do you perceive a later phase of potential amendments coming forward?
You know, I don't have a time frame on that. I thought we would see what our experience is with. We have some applications right now from American Tower Corporation, which you're going to see next month, and that is the American Tower Corporation representatives in the back row. And they couldn't even go forward if what we've already done we don't do today. But we wanted to, at staff, to talk some more about whether we wanted to open the door for rural remote and for TR1 and TR2 for towers. We do allow building-mounted antenna on most zone districts, including the urban growth and the residential districts that are close in. We just weren't ready yet to open them to cell towers, but we thought that would be experience-based before we jumped that way.
Okay.
Don't have a timeline.
Yeah, I was just wondering whether it's worth putting up special review provision in this now, but if staff is not feeling that, you necessarily have the criteria or the other, adjunct materials needed to make a good evaluation of those, then it wouldn't make sense. I don't want to be caught opening a door that, we don't have, the room furnished to go with.
And the biggest concern was the rural remote, frankly. Not as much a concern as the what I would call the inner city zone districts, where as long as we have the 200-foot setback criteria from a house, we're unlikely to get into too much trouble. But rural remote, we were pretty concerned about.
Okay. I'll let it go for now, but we'll look at it when we need to.
I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the ordinance of the Board of County Commissioners of Pickens County, Colorado, amending Title 8 of the Pickens County Code, specifically the 2006 Land Use Code, related to wireless communication facilities.
Second, with two amendments. One would be the rewrite of the setback from vacant lots, and the other would be adding that provision about as subject to FCC guidelines and regulations.
Yes.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Last on our agenda for agenda items is Woody Creek Subdivision Metro District Service Plan, first reading.
I'll stay here with you then, Rhonda.
Okay. Yeah, I think Gus is going to do it.
This is the first reading of the proposed Woody Creek subdivision, a.k.a. Woody Creek Mobile Home Park, is how it had been known for years and years and years before becoming the Woody Creek subdivision. The request on the part of the Homeowners Association, as represented by Rhonda Basil, requests to have a Metropolitan Service District Plan approval from the Board of County Commissioners, which would then allow the Homeowners Association to go forward with an election to formally determine whether or not they want to become a Metropolitan District taxing district. This goes back 5 years. For any of you who have been around that long, you'll remember that. You'll remember that when the Woody Creek subdivision went through its subdivision process, and the county assisted the homeowners with purchasing their individual lots so that that could become a true subdivision with individually owned lots, that they undertook a tremendous amount of capital improvements in terms of roads, an entirely new water system, upgrading their sewer system, upgrading their electrical system, their street lights, a tremendous undertaking. And if you'll recall, there were tremendous cost overruns that accompanied those improvements. There were serious difficulties on the part of many homeowners to maintain paying their assessments, and particularly special assessments that had to be added in order to fund these improvements. And on several occasions, the Homeowners Association came to the Board of County Commissioners and asked for assistance. Is there any way you can help us out of this bind? We have people who can't pay their dues, the improvements aren't being completed, and the Board of County Commissioners was not able to actually subsidize the improvements. But what the board agreed to do was to help fund looking into the formation of a metropolitan taxing district, which would be perhaps a better way of funding the improvements, a more reliable way, a more cost-effective way, and perhaps a less expensive way for many of the homeowners to fund the improvements that were underway, as well as the ongoing capital reserves and the subdivision needs into the future. So the board agreed to allocate $100,000 to have Rhonda and an economic consultant work on putting together a metropolitan district service plan that could be considered by the HOA and considered by the Board of County Commissioners. That has taken several years because there have been some fits and starts and some understanding questions that have taken a long time to get straight. But at this point, you do have before you a proposed metropolitan district service plan, and it requires 2 readings. A first reading, which we're here today in front of the Board of County Commissioners, then a second reading and a public hearing. This is not the public hearing. And the public hearing requires notification to each individual property owner so they know when and where and what it's about. The second reading was originally scheduled for May 14th. Unfortunately, the wrong mill levies, potential mill levies, got into the notice that went out to the homeowners. So that notice is going to be redone. And so the second reading will have to be moved from the 14th to the 28th. I just wanted to alert you to that, and while I'm on TV talking about that right now, we can't do that because we have to do the notice to the homeowners again. But be that as it may, you do have before you a service plan that presented to you by the Homeowners Association. There are some specific standards under which the county is to review a service plan when it makes its finding as to whether or not to approve that service plan and allow it to move forward to an election. The important ones of those are outlined in my memo about: is there sufficient existing and projected need for service in the area? Is the district capable of providing economical and sufficient service within the boundary? Will it have the financial ability to discharge the proposed indebtedness on a reasonable basis? That's what the economic study is for. We have reviewed those criteria, and from a staff perspective, we feel that the most important of those criteria are met by the needs of the Woody Creek subdivision, and that the financial analysis shows that it is feasible and that it does provide a economical and practical method for the homeowners to meet their immediate capital needs as well as their future needs. And we're recommending that the board approve the formation of the Woody Creek Subdivision Metropolitan District Service Plan on first reading, subject to conditions in the attached resolution, and set public hearing and second reading for May 14th, and that's actually would need to be May 28th, not May 14th.
Questions of staff? Rachel?
So then when would the vote be should this pass first and second reading?
Well, then we file a petition with the court, and sorry, I'm Rhonda Basil. I represent the Woody Creek Homeowners Association. I have Gus Phyllis with me. He's the president of the Homeowners Association. So we file a petition, and the court will then, if it approves the formation of the district, then it will set an election. So I can't tell you when that will be.
Okay. And would the election also have the bonding question at that time? Will bond be needed at that time to take out the existing debt? Would it be both a formation and a bonding question?
It will not be a bonding question.
No. And so it's not perceived that, you know, and again, I'm going from ancient history on this with the community bank's note. Has that been paid off, or is it new arrangements been made just to carry that note without a bond?
That actually has been paid off.
Okay.
So for those of you who don't have the history, the 5-year history on this project, what happened was with the cost overruns, the Homeowners Association ended up with about $460,000 in debt at 7.75% for 5 years. That almost doubled their Homeowners Association dues. So right now they have paid off that loan. They have about $100,000 in construction costs left to go to complete all of the improvements that were anticipated at the time of subdivision. So with that, they are really at a break-even point. So it is still very critical that they form the district, and that will provide them with a couple of things. First of all, we think that it will make collection of assessments easier, since the county is the one collecting the tax assessments. And so you don't have neighbors going after neighbors trying to enforce payment of the Homeowners Association dues. You also have the benefit of having a tax write-off. So for some of the homeowners, they will be able to write off the portion that they pay through the real estate tax. They will still be paying a small amount every month to the Homeowners Association, and what we've come up with is overall they'll be going from a current Homeowners Association dues of about $180 a month to about $212. That is before taxes. So what that's going to do is keep operations going forward at the normal rate, but it will also allow for a significant capital reserve fund. Right now, if they have a pump go out, if they have a water leak, they don't have the funds there to do any repairs. So this is, I look at the district as the mechanism to fund their capital reserve account in a way that is the least burdensome to the homeowners. So right now we've got, if we go forward based upon those assessments, we've got 19 homes that would be above that average of $212 a month in assessments, and you have 39 homes that would be below that average. So most people will be paying less than they are now under the district plan. The way we're looking at capital reserves is there's about $3 million in capital improvements there in the water, wastewater system, the streets and everything. Rather than start out at a regular 1% of the value of the improvements, we are going to bring the cost of the capital reserve account in 4-year increments. So they're going to start out at about 25%. After 4 years, they're going to go to 50%. So once that works its way into place, assuming they don't have any big expenses in the meantime, they'll have about $300,000 in capital reserves in about 6 years. So given that amount of money, that allows them to not only have emergency funds, but to go out and get loans at a reasonable rate. Or, as Rachel was saying earlier, if they needed to have significant repairs, maybe down the road when replacement of any of those systems is required, they could get a bond in place at that time at a lower interest rate. So one of the issues of why it's taken so long, we have been through so many iterations of the financial feasibility study. There have been a number of different iterations just for the homeowners themselves, but we also have the 2 commercial property owners there that are also on the water and sewer system. So they've been in, they've been out, they've been in. I think the reality is when you have only 60 owners or users on a system like this, on a central system, there are no economies of scale. It is expensive to run, and I think when everyone started looking at what it was going to cost to start having the commercial property owners not only pay their share of costs of operating expenses, but to pay their share of costs of the capital reserve account, I think there was some shock about the numbers that were going into place. But we have agreement from those owners that they will participate. They will be billed on the basis of their usage of water. So right now they're around 13% of the total water use on the entire system. And so both capital reserve and operating costs will be covered by them. Again, they will be outside of the district boundaries, so they will not be assessed on property values. Again, they're free market, so their values were significantly higher, of course, than the 58 homeowners units in the subdivision. They will be billed just as an extraterritorial service under an extraterritorial service agreement. So we've walked through all of these numbers with both of those commercial property owners. So really what that leaves us with is the criteria under the statute, and we certainly believe that we meet all of that criteria of existing and projected need. These 60 homes have no other way to get water and sewer service. They cannot go to individual wells, and they cannot go to septic systems. The existing service is inadequate for present and projected needs. I think that's the more important part is we need the finances in place to maintain the existing service to provide long-term reliability of the system. I think the financial feasibility study that was performed shows that the district is fully capable of providing economical and sufficient service. The system has been operated by the Homeowners Association now since the subdivision is in place. That also, the financial feasibility analysis also covers the financial ability of the district. Municipal service is obviously not available anywhere within the county, so the only other service is at the W/J Ranch, and they only have a water system that was sized specifically for that development. They do not have any wastewater services up there. This is certainly in compliance with the county master plan and the state long-range water quality management plan, since the water treatment system is permitted under the water quality control guidelines. So it has to meet all of those criteria before that water goes back into the river. And this is certainly in the best interests of the area, I think both residential and commercial property owners. So when when we're finished here, if we get approval from the BOCC, then we'll move forward with the court filing there too. One last thing is the fee issue. We have run out of fees on this project, and so we are asking for a waiver of the application fees to Pickens County. That was about $1,900. We had your GIS department do some mapping for us. I think that was a very nominal fee of around $100 or so. Jeanette, I think so. Is that about right? There's a small bill still outstanding to Economic and Planning System of about $350, and I have some ongoing invoices of about $10,000.
So I'm a little unclear. Is that a request for all of those?
That would be a request for all of those.
All
yes.
of those that we just mentioned, so somewhere around $15,000 or something like that? Rachel?
Yeah. We had started this project, I guess, with $100,000 from the county general fund to be able to support this effort. And it has been a long road. I know a number of obstacles have been thrown up. I had before, and I continue to believe that, and I think, I'm not sure if it became a board decision or not, that we shouldn't try to recover any of that investment of the $100,000 through fees back to the association. The new fee waiver request is kind of new. I mean, I really haven't given that any thought, so I'd like to listen to the board about it. The question I'd had before that last one was thrown on there is that I want to make sure that at the appropriate time, I guess, and that would probably be after it passes an election, but that it really is ready to go operational, that the accounting systems are set up, an accounting firm has been hired, you know, or whoever to do the work to make sure that these funds are escrowed appropriately, applied appropriately, you know, that it really comes to pass. As opposed to having a 60-day lag before they get a manager of the Metro District. I want to make sure that it's really ready to be operational and start, you know, dispersing the funds as appropriate and reserving the funds as appropriate. I don't know who that agent would be for the homeowners association or how it would occur as you step out of your role, and who is going to step up to make sure this stays on an even keel going forward.
When the petition gets filed with the court, we have to list who the new board of directors will be for the district. Okay. And those people will be responsible for moving everything forward with bookkeeping and managers and that sort of thing.
Thank you.
I follow up on that question. Responsible to whom?
To the homeowners.
Is that those board is made up of the homeowners?
It will be, yes.
So they're responsible to them, just like an HOA.
Right. Yes.
Okay. George?
I guess what it does, you're looking for what the
well,
is?
You know, HOAs, you know, when you look at like employee housing or something, they're you know, somewhat dysfunctional because they can't collect. Here we have an organization that couldn't collect among themselves, so they want to go to an outside taxing organization to collect the money, and then they want to create a board which couldn't collect from themselves before to manage that money. I mean, I almost think there should be
I don't think that's a fair characterization, Rob, but I understand where you're getting at. I think they've been a capable board, and that's why they've gotten this far. It's taken a lot of time, but they've gotten this far. I just don't want to characterize.
Yeah, you're right. I apologize for characterizing that way. I'm just saying, in general, it's nice to have some outside eyes on things and managing some things. So hopefully they seek that advice. Steve?
Yeah. There are several metropolitan districts around, like the Gateway Mesa one, that are kind of similar size and similar projects that they have to do, and it might just talk to them. Bob Walker would be the one from Gateway Mesa to talk to, just to see how they have it set up, who they have, do their accounting, or all the little nuts and bolts of it.
I do know that, I'm sorry, I do know that they have a bookkeeper who does a really good job of the bookkeeping. And then the collection issues, Rob, goes to the county actually will be doing the collections. So that really resolves that issue from that standpoint. And I know the W/J Ranch Metro District is self-managed as well.
And I just had a couple quick questions. Would this be on the November ballot if we approve it? And then when would the taxes actually first be collected?
Well, it depends on when the election is. So, that all depends on when the court orders the election. The court can order a special election for the formation of a district, but I would think it would probably be on the November ballot. So I don't know that they would be able to collect this year, you think, by
Do a
December?
special date. It's up to you guys to request that of the court and to incorporate that within your...
And then would you be able to start collecting money during next year? I know that the taxes are offset by one way or the other. I can never remember which way your
taxes are due the following year for the
previous year.
So if there was a November election and a tax was imposed, it would go into effect beginning 2015, and then it would be due payable 2016.
So they'll continue with their regular assessments until...
You would do the regular assessment until you can get the tax,
Does that create a year of double assessments until the tax, it's collected to be able to use in 16, but you have to do ongoing maintenance the first year?
No, we can time that.
Okay.
George, did you have something?
Yeah, well, I'm excited to hear that we finally got to this point, and I'm also impressed that the homeowners were able to pay off that debt that we were all so concerned about 5 years ago. So congratulations for getting that done. I would, and we committed $100,000, which I think showed our commitment to helping the homeowners out of what we felt was a dire situation. I was happy to do that. But now we're getting another bill, and some of it's minor in terms of waiving fees, and some of it are your expenses, which is a little more substantial, up to about $15,000. And I would like to, for us to consider that gets paid out over a period of time from the capital reserves that the homeowners, the Metropolitan District will be getting. So we get, that could be paid off, I think, fairly painlessly from that reserve over a couple of years.
Are you proposing that we would pay it and then it would be paid back to us? Is that what you're proposing, George?
Well,
or are you proposing that they pay it and they pay themselves back?
Well, I'm not sure how the dynamics is. What I'm suggesting is that we don't contribute any additional dollars, but we find a mechanism that they're able to pay it back without having to increase their own home assessments.
John?
There's probably a couple of governance issues involved here. One, the budget discussion needs to probably come separate from the land use discussion as an MOI. The issue of fees and such, particularly for the filing, needs to be dealt with before the district is created, and so that's one set of issues. Right now, there isn't a legitimate governing body that could obligate the district to any expenditures, and so it's difficult right now to obligate particularly tax dollars that haven't been approved by the voters and for which there's no board to authoritatively So we're kind of in a double bind there. I think it's something that we could approach the district on once it's formed, but we probably need to tease apart the issue of moving this plan forward and then coming back and talking about really we should probably do it as an appropriation to go ahead and pay the fees and such versus waiving them, because that's been our practice. If that's the board's desire, as well as looking at tying up, do we want to contribute additional funds to tie up this district process? I will tell you, I did go to the last meeting with Rhonda. I think the Homeowners Association has worked hard to get to this point. I think it's been a very difficult set of discussions with a lot of iterations, and I'm not sure right now what the appetite of the Homeowners Association is, to bring this over the goal line when we're this close on the financial side. It was a unanimous vote, or not quite unanimous vote, but it was an almost unanimous vote with one abstention, as I recall, to move this forward. But nonetheless, it was a difficult discussion, I think, for the residents. And so I just want to note for the board, before I get too far down this road, that we'd need other folks to make those obligations, and that structure doesn't exist yet.
It's complicated by the fact that the outcome of the election can't be predicted, and so the obligations are still out there, regardless. And not only is there a lag time for the ability of a newly constituted board to address it, but might not be there in place at the time that we anticipate, depending on what happens at the election.
Yeah, so I understand, thank you, and I don't really want to impose any further burden on the homeowners. I was just looking at an opportunity to have a payback through a capital reserve over a period of time. So.
Further discussion? Rachel?
Yeah. I appreciate that guidance on this issue, John, and I just want to clarify at least how I added it up. It's around $12,350, not $15,000, but every penny counts. I'm wondering if you're ready for a motion.
I'm ready for a motion.
I would make a motion to approve the Woody Creek Subdivision Metro District Service Plan on first reading.
Second. First and a second. Any discussion? Yes?
And Rachel, statutorily, you need to schedule a second reading.
Oh, okay.
May 28th, second reading.
May 28th, second reading. Thank you.
And public hearing on May 28th.
Okay.
Michael?
I just want to say that, given the history of this development and the labors that have been put in by us and by the homeowners, that there's a maturity being reached here, and a maturity manifesting itself in the mobile home park. And so this is one of those stages, it seems to me, of becoming a bona fide organization that's able to handle its debt, able to schedule its debt, and schedule its obligations, looking into the future. And that's why this is important, it seems to me. And I'm glad we seem to be going ahead with this. And the issue of how we pay for these overages, I think we'll deal with later in some constructive ways, as George would like to. But I think that it's really necessary to pass this.
Yeah. I would comment just as well that, I had on my notes that I see this as really stepping into a greater level of responsibility and accountability among the homeowners to participate in their own metro district, and it really will open the opportunities up. It's something you may not see a crisis right now and the old debt's paid off, but boy, what a tool for when future needs occur within the community. And it's just a great management tool. It's a structure that's taken a good bit of work to get here, but I think will really have a lot of benefit going forward.
Further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for all your hard work.
John, I'm sure the painkillers are wearing off. Any open discussion?
Still no open discussion.
Painkillers are not wearing off.
Yeah.
No, John, don't let those wear off.
Any open discussion by the board?
No.
Seeing none, I will accept the motion to adjourn for today.
So moved.
Second. First and second, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Ooh, 7 o'clock.
We had some big ones on that.